I was fired for being late because I stopped to help a pregnant stranger in the rain. 25 minutes of kindness cost me everything: my job, my dignity, my daughter's stability. My boss didn't care about reasons. He didn't care that I'd given 5 perfect years. He just wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone. But what he didn't know, what none of us knew, was that the woman I helped owned the entire company, and she was about to turn my world upside down. Before we dive in, comment below what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The alarm clock screamed at 6:15 a.m., but Daniel Hayes was already awake. He'd been lying in the pre-dawn darkness for the past 20 minutes, staring at the water-stained ceiling of his bedroom, mentally rehearsing the presentation he'd been preparing for weeks. Today was the day that could change everything for him and Maddie. He swung his legs out of bed, his bare feet hitting the cold hardwood floor of their small rental house on Maple Street. The autumn chill had already settled into the bones of the old place, and he made a mental note, again, to check if they could afford to run the heat a little higher this month. Probably not. Not until after the promotion came through. If the promotion came through. Daniel pushed the thought away and padded down the narrow hallway, pausing at his daughter's door. Through the crack, he could see 7-year-old Maddie sprawled across her twin bed, one arm dangling off the side, her favorite stuffed elephant clutched in the other. Her dark curls, so much like her mother's, spread across the pillow like a halo. For a moment, Daniel just watched her breathe, feeling that familiar ache in his chest that never quite went away. Sarah had been gone for 3 years now. 3 years since the cancer took her. 3 years of being both mother and father, of packed lunches and parent-teacher conferences, of braiding hair with YouTube tutorials and trying to explain why mommy wasn't coming back. 3 years of holding it together because Maddie needed him to. And he had held it together. Barely. But today could be the turning point they desperately needed. Daniel moved to the kitchen, flicking on the light to reveal the cramped space that served as their command center. The refrigerator hummed loudly, covered in Maddie's artwork held up by mismatched magnets. Bills were stacked on the counter, some opened, some he hadn't had the courage to face yet. The kitchen table, small and wobbly, held his laptop surrounded by printed spreadsheets and presentation notes. He reached for the coffee maker, the one luxury he allowed himself, and pressed the button. Nothing happened. He pressed it again. Still nothing. Daniel felt his jaw tighten as he unplugged it and plugged it back in, trying again with the same result. No, 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 he muttered, checking the outlet with his phone charger. The outlet worked fine. The coffee maker, his faithful companion through countless early mornings and late-night budgeting sessions, had finally given up the ghost. Not today, please. Not today. But begging didn't fix broken appliances. Daniel leaned against the counter, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. It was fine. He'd get coffee at work. He had bigger things to worry about than caffeine. He pulled bread from the bag for toast, sliding 2 slices into the toaster. While he waited, he opened the fridge to grab the butter and eggs. The light inside flickered weakly, and Daniel made another mental note he couldn't afford to act on. Everything in this house was held together with hope and duct tape. The smell hit him before he saw the smoke, that acrid, burning scent that meant he'd been lost in thought too long. Daniel spun to see black smoke curling from the toaster. Damn it! He popped the lever, and 2 pieces of charcoal ejected onto the counter. He waved away the smoke, hoping the alarm wouldn't trigger and wake Maddie. Of course it triggered. The shrill beeping filled the small house as Daniel grabbed a dish towel and fanned the detector. Through the noise, he heard Maddie's door open. Daddy? Her small voice cut through the chaos. Is there a fire? No, baby, it's okay, Daniel called out, still waving the towel. Daddy just burned the toast. Go back to bed for a few more minutes. But she was already padding into the kitchen in her princess nightgown, rubbing sleep from her eyes. It's really smoky. I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry. The alarm finally stopped, and Daniel tossed the ruined toast into the trash. He checked his watch, 6:47 a.m. His carefully planned morning was already falling apart, and he hadn't even gotten Maddie dressed yet. Are you making breakfast? Maddie climbed onto one of the kitchen chairs, her legs swinging. I was trying to, Daniel said, attempting a smile. How about cereal instead? Can I have the one with the marshmallows? Nice try. The one with the marshmallows is for weekends. You can have the honey wheat puffs. Maddie wrinkled her nose but didn't argue. She knew the rules. They'd had the conversation about everyday cereal versus special cereal enough times that she'd memorized it along with her multiplication tables. As Daniel poured her bowl, he mentally recalculated his morning timeline. If Maddie could get dressed without issue, if they could find her shoes on the first try, if traffic cooperated, he could still make it to Freshmart Regional Headquarters by 8:30 a.m. The presentation was at 9. He'd have just enough time to review his notes and grab that desperately needed coffee. "Daddy, can you help me pick out my clothes?" Maddie asked through a mouthful of cereal. "Sure, baby. Eat up first, though. We need to move fast this morning. Daddy has a really important meeting at work." Maddie's eyes widened with interest. "The one you've been practicing for?" "That's the one." "Are you going to be the boss?" Daniel laughed softly as he rinsed the burnt pan in the sink. "Not the boss exactly, but if this goes well, I'd be a supervisor. It means more money, which means we can maybe fix the heater, and you could do gymnastics like you've been asking about." "Really?" Maddie's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Can I get a leotard with sparkles?" "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Daniel cautioned, but he was smiling. This was why it mattered. Not for him. He could live on burnt toast and broken coffee makers forever. But for her. To give her the childhood she deserved. The opportunities that had been slipping through his fingers month after month. 20 minutes later, after Maddie had changed outfits twice and Daniel had located her missing shoe under the couch, they were finally ready to leave. Daniel wore his best suit, the charcoal gray one Sarah had helped him pick out years ago. It was slightly worn at the elbows, but he'd paired it with a crisp white shirt and his lucky blue tie. He looked professional, confident, like someone who deserved a promotion. He grabbed his presentation folder, his keys, and the brown paper lunch bag he'd packed for Maddie the night before. "Do I look okay?" he asked Maddie, straightening his tie in the hallway mirror. She studied him seriously, then nodded. "You look like a superhero going to work." "A superhero, huh?" "Yeah, like the ones that wear suits. You know, the secret identity ones." Daniel felt warmth spread through his chest. He knelt down to her level. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot." He kissed her forehead. "Now let's get you to Mrs. Patterson's house, and then Daddy's got to save the world." Mrs. Patterson was their neighbor, a retired teacher who watched Maddie before and after school for a price Daniel could barely afford but absolutely needed. She was a godsend, patient, kind, and genuinely fond of Maddie. The morning air was crisp and heavy with moisture as they stepped outside. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and Daniel felt the first drops of rain as he unlocked his aging Honda Civic. The car was a decade old with 180,000 miles on it, but it ran, and that was what mattered. He'd just buckled Maddie into her booster seat when she said, "Daddy, I forgot to show you something." "What's that, baby?" She dug into her backpack and pulled out a piece of construction paper. "We had to draw our hero in school. I drew you." Daniel took the paper and his throat tightened. There he was, rendered in crayon, a stick figure with dark hair and a huge smile, wearing what appeared to be angel wings. Above the drawing, in Maddie's careful print, she'd written, "My daddy, he helps people." "Maddie," Daniel's voice came out rougher than he intended. "This is beautiful." "Mrs. Chen said we're putting them up on the wall for Parents' Night. She said your one is really good because you help people even when you're tired." Daniel pulled his daughter into a hug, pressing his face into her hair so she wouldn't see the tears pricking his eyes. "I love you so much, baby girl." "I love you too, Daddy, even when you burn toast." He laughed, the sound breaking through the emotion, "Especially when I burn toast." He carefully folded the drawing and slipped it into his presentation folder. "I'm keeping this with me today, for luck." The drive to Mrs. Patterson's took only 5 minutes. The elderly woman answered the door in her usual cardigan and warm smile, already holding a plate of homemade banana muffins. "There's my favorite girl," Mrs. Patterson exclaimed as Maddie bounded inside. "I just pulled these out of the oven." "You're a lifesaver, Helen," Daniel said gratefully. "I should be done by 5:30, 6 at the latest." "No rush, dear. We'll have a grand time. Good luck with your meeting." "Thank you. I really appreciate everything you do." Back in the car, Daniel felt the nervous energy building. He had 45 minutes to make a 30-minute drive. Plenty of time. He merged onto the highway, mentally reviewing his opening statement. He'd researched the proposal for months. A new inventory management system that could save Freshmart Regional approximately $200,000 annually across their 12 locations. He'd run the numbers a dozen times, created detailed projections, even mocked up sample reports. His boss, Robert Hendricks, had been less than encouraging. Hendricks was old school, the kind of manager who valued FaceTime over innovation, who seemed to resent employees who showed initiative. But the regional director would be in this meeting. If Daniel could impress Mr. Morrison, Hendricks' opinion wouldn't matter. The rain began in earnest as Daniel crossed into the commercial district, where Freshmart's regional headquarters stood, a sleek glass building that always seemed incongruous with the blue-collar neighborhood surrounding it. He was making good time, would arrive at 8:25, have plenty of time to... That's when he saw her. On the side of the road, just past the Morrison Avenue exit, a black sedan sat with its hazard lights blinking. A woman stood beside it in the pouring rain, one hand waving frantically at passing traffic, the other cradling what was unmistakably a pregnant belly. Daniel's foot instinctively moved toward the brake, then hesitated over the gas pedal. His eyes flicked to the dashboard clock, 8:17 a.m. He had time, but not much. If he stopped, if there was a problem, if it took longer than a few minutes... He looked at the woman again. She was drenched, her business clothes plastered to her body, her face a mask of desperation as car after car passed her by. No one was stopping. In the rain, in the morning rush, with their own problems and schedules and deadlines, everyone just drove past. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He thought of Maddie's drawing in his folder. My daddy, he helps people. He thought of Sarah, who used to tease him about stopping to help every stranded motorist, every lost tourist, every person who looked like they needed a hand. You're going to make us late to our own wedding, she'd joked once, but she'd loved that about him. He thought of the presentation, the promotion, the gymnastics classes, and the fixed heater and everything riding on the next hour. The woman waved again, more desperately this time. Damn it, Daniel muttered and pulled onto the shoulder. The rain hammered against his windshield as he put the car in park. Through the downpour, he could see the woman turn toward him, hope flooding her face. Daniel grabbed his old rain jacket from the back seat. It had a broken zipper, but it was better than nothing, and stepped out into the storm. He was soaked within seconds. Thank God, the woman gasped as he approached. She was younger than he'd thought from the car, probably early 30s, with dark hair plastered to her face and mascara running down her cheeks. Her hand rested protectively on her belly, which looked about 6 or 7 months along. I've been here for 20 minutes. No one would stop. What's the problem? Daniel had to raise his voice over the rain. Flat tire. I tried to call a tow truck, but they said at least an hour, and I have... She checked her phone with a shaking hand. I have a critical meeting in 40 minutes downtown, and I can't miss it. I just can't. Daniel was already moving to the back of her car, noting the deflated rear passenger tire. Do you have a spare? I think so. I don't know how to change it. That's okay. I do. Daniel checked his watch, 8:19. If he worked fast, really fast, he could still make it. Pop your trunk. The woman did, and Daniel found a spare tire kit that looked like it had never been used. He pulled out the jack and the spare, his suit jacket already ruined, his white shirt transparent with rain. He didn't care. He'd made the choice the moment he pulled over, and he'd make it again. I'm Claire, by the way, the woman said, hovering nearby. Claire Whitmore. Daniel Hayes. He positioned the jack under the car's frame. You should wait in your car, Miss Whitmore. No point in both of us getting soaked. I can't just sit there while you're in a suit. You must have somewhere important to be, too. I do, Daniel admitted, cranking the jack. But you're pregnant and stranded. That trumps a work meeting. Claire's voice wavered. I don't know how to thank you. Everyone just kept driving past, and I started to panic. What if something happened to the baby? What if... Hey! Daniel paused his work to look up at her. Rain streamed down his face, but he smiled. You're okay. The baby's okay. We're going to get you to your meeting, all right? She nodded, tears mixing with the rain on her face. You're a good person. Daniel returned to the tire, removing the lug nuts with practiced efficiency. The rain made everything harder. The wrench kept slipping, his fingers were numb, and he could barely see what he was doing through the downpour. But he changed dozens of tires in his life. This was just one more. "Do you have kids?" Claire asked, still standing in the rain despite his suggestion. "A daughter, Maddie. She's 7. "She's lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," Daniel said, wrestling the flat tire off. He checked his watch again, 8:31. His stomach dropped. Even if he left right now, even if he broke every speed limit, he'd be late. "Is your husband or partner around? Someone who could pick you up?" "No husband, no partner, just me and this little one." Claire's hand moved over her belly again. "I know people think I should have waited, done things in the right order, but I wanted this baby. I chose this." "You don't have to explain your life to me," Daniel said, lifting the spare tire into place. His arms burned with the effort, rain running into his eyes. "The only right order is the one that works for you." "Not everyone sees it that way, especially in business, especially when you're a woman." Daniel threaded the lug nuts back on, tightening them in a star pattern the way his father had taught him 30 years ago. "Then they're idiots. Any company worth working for would see that being a parent, any kind of parent, makes you stronger, not weaker. It gives you something real to work for." Claire was quiet for a moment. "Your daughter is very lucky," she repeated softly. The tire was on. Daniel lowered the jack and tossed the flat into her trunk, his presentation time ticking away with each passing second. 8:39. He was officially late. Even if he left right this second, even if there were no traffic lights, no slow drivers, no obstacles between here and the office, he couldn't make it. The promotion was slipping through his fingers like the rain soaking through his clothes. But Claire was safe, her baby was safe. She could make her meeting. "All set," Daniel said, closing her trunk. "Drive carefully. The spare isn't meant for high speeds. Get to a tire shop when you can." Claire grabbed his arm. "Please, let me pay you. I can Venmo you, or—" "No payment needed." Daniel was already backing toward his car. "Just pay it forward someday. Help someone else when they need it." "Wait, at least take my card." Claire fumbled in her purse, pulled out a business card that was soaked through and pressed it into his hand. "Please, I want to thank you properly. Call me." Daniel glanced at the card, too wet to read, and shoved it in his jacket pocket. "Take care of yourself and that baby, Claire." He ran back to his Honda, threw himself into the driver's seat, and checked the clock. 8:42 a.m. The meeting started in 18 minutes. The drive would take at least 20, possibly more in this weather. Daniel pulled onto the highway, his hands shaking now, from cold, from adrenaline, from the dawning realization of what he'd just done. He'd sacrificed his shot at the promotion for a stranger. He'd put someone else's crisis above his own dreams, his daughter's needs, their future. Sarah would have been proud. But would Maddie understand when they couldn't afford gymnastics, when they had to choose between fixing the heater and buying winter clothes, when Daddy had to explain that good deeds didn't pay the bills? The rain seemed to mock him as he drove, the windshield wipers struggling to keep up with the downpour. Daniel pressed the gas pedal harder, knowing it was futile. The universe didn't reward you for being late, no matter how noble the reason. His phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. Hendricks. Daniel's jaw clenched. He considered not answering, but that would only make things worse. He pressed the button on his steering wheel. "Hayes, where the hell are you?" "I'm 10 minutes out, sir. I had an emergency." "The meeting starts in 15 minutes. Mr. Morrison is already here." "I know, and I'm so sorry, but there was a woman stranded on the highway. She was pregnant, and I don't care if the president was stranded on the highway, Hayes. You're supposed to be here." Daniel felt anger flash through his chest. "Sir, with respect, I'm doing everything I can to get there. I'll be there by 9:15 at the latest. The presentation is solid. I just need— 9:15? Hayes, your slot is at 9 o'clock. You think Morrison is going to wait around for you? You think your little inventory project is the only thing on his agenda? Can we push it back? No, we cannot push it back." "You know what? Don't even bother coming in. You just made your priorities crystal clear, and this company isn't one of them." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. "Mr. Hendricks, please, I'm literally pulling into the parking lot right now." He wasn't, but he was close. "I can present at 9:15 or later or tomorrow. Just give me a chance to—" You had your chance. You blew it. We'll discuss your future here when you arrive. If you arrive. The line went dead. Daniel's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The rain blurred everything outside. The other cars, the highway signs, the world itself dissolving into gray water. He felt something rising in his throat, something that might have been a scream or a sob or both. But he swallowed it down. He always swallowed it down. Because he was Daniel Hayes, single father, survivor, the man who held it together no matter what, the man Maddie had drawn with angel wings. He made it to the Fresh Mart parking lot at 8:54, 6 minutes before the meeting, which would have been plenty of time if he hadn't been soaking wet and disheveled. Daniel sat in his car for a moment, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His hair was plastered to his head, his shirt was transparent, his tie hung limp and pathetic. He looked like he'd swum to work. He looked like exactly what he was, a desperate man who'd made a choice and would now pay the price. Daniel grabbed his presentation folder, thank God it had been in the car, not on him, and ran through the rain to the building entrance. His shoes squished with every step, leaving wet footprints on the polished lobby floor. The receptionist's eyes widened as he passed. "Mr. Hayes, are you... Where's the meeting?" Daniel didn't break stride. "Conference room B, but..." He took the stairs 2 at a time, his breath coming in gasps. Second floor, down the hall, past the break room and the accounting department. Conference room B. He could see it through the glass walls, a long table with a dozen people seated around it, including Robert Hendricks at the head and an older man in an expensive suit who had to be Mr. Morrison. Daniel pushed through the door at exactly 9:01 a.m. Every head turned. The conversation died, and Daniel stood there, dripping onto the carpet, holding his folder like a shield. "Sorry I'm late," he began. "I had..." "Hayes!" Hendrick's voice could have frozen the rain outside. "Step outside. Now." "Sir, I can explain." "Outside now." The other people in the room wouldn't meet Daniel's eyes. They all suddenly found their notepads fascinating, their coffee cups requiring urgent attention. Only Mr. Morrison looked at him directly, his expression unreadable. Daniel felt his face burning as he backed out of the conference room. Hendricks followed, closing the door behind them with deliberate care. "Sir, there was a pregnant woman stranded in the rain." "I don't want to hear it, Hayes." "Her tire was flat, and no one was stopping, and I couldn't just..." "You couldn't just show up on time for the most important meeting of your career? You couldn't just do your job?" Daniel's hands tightened on his folder. "I did do my job. My job as a human being." "Your job," Hendricks said, his voice low and dangerous, "is whatever this company tells you it is. Your job is to be here, on time, ready to work, not playing Good Samaritan on the highway. She was pregnant and alone, and you were late. Again." "Again?" Daniel felt his stomach drop. "I've never been late, not once in 5 years." Hendricks pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and showed Daniel the screen. 3 weeks ago, 7 minutes late." "My daughter was sick. I had to take her to Mrs. Patterson's, and she threw up in the car, and I had to..." "I don't care about your excuses, Hayes. I care about results. I care about commitment. I care about employees who put this company first." "Above my daughter? Above someone who needed help?" "Yes!" Hendricks' voice is echoing in the empty hallway. "Yes! Above everything else, because that's what it means to be a professional. That's what it means to deserve a promotion. And clearly, you don't have what it takes." Daniel felt something break inside him, something that had been cracking for 3 years since Sarah died, since he'd been trying to be everything to everyone and failing at all of it. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't have what it takes to be the kind of person who drives past someone in trouble. I don't have what it takes to put a meeting ahead of someone's safety. And if that's what this company values, then maybe I don't belong here." Finally, something we agree on. Hendricks crossed his arms. "You're fired, Hayes." The words seemed to come from very far away. "What?" "You're fired, effective immediately. Clean out your desk and leave your badge with security." "You can't. I have bills. I have Maddie. I need this job." "You should have thought of that before you decided to play hero." Hendricks turned back toward the conference room. "I'll have HR process your final paycheck. It'll include your remaining PTO, so you should get about 2 weeks' pay. Use it to work on your time management. Robert, please. Daniel hated the desperation in his voice, but he couldn't stop it. Please, I've worked here for 5 years. I've never missed a deadline, never had a customer complaint, never. You were late. You missed your presentation. You wasted Mr. Morrison's time. Those are the facts, Hayes. Everything else is just excuses. Hendricks paused with his hand on the conference room door. You know what your problem is? You think being a nice guy matters. It doesn't. Results matter. Reliability matters. And you just proved you have neither. Hendricks walked back into the conference room, leaving Daniel standing alone in the hallway, dripping rainwater onto the carpet, holding a presentation no one would ever see. Through the glass walls, Daniel could see the meeting resuming. Someone else was standing now, presenting their own proposal. Life at Freshmart Regional was moving on without him, as if he'd never existed. Daniel walked to his tiny desk in the corner of the third-floor workspace. Not even a cubicle, just a desk in the open floor plan where everyone could hear everyone else's calls and smell everyone else's lunches. It had never bothered him before. He'd been grateful just to have a job. His things fit into a single cardboard box. A framed picture of Maddie, his coffee mug with "World's Best Dad" on it, a Mother's Day gift she'd been so proud of, a stapler he'd bought himself because the company ones kept disappearing, and the crayon angel Maddie had drawn. My daddy, he helps people. Daniel sat at his desk, his former desk, and stared at that drawing. The rain continued outside, softer now, like the sky itself was exhausted. Around him, his coworkers pretended to work while obviously watching his humiliation. A few looked sympathetic. Most looked away. This was what kindness bought you in the real world. A box of personal items and 2 weeks' severance. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Patterson. Maddie wants to know if you got the promotion. She's so excited. He stared at the message, his vision blurring. How was he supposed to tell his daughter? How was he supposed to explain that Daddy lost his job because he stopped to help someone, because he'd learned all the wrong lessons about what mattered in life? Another buzz. She says she knew you'd get it because you're a superhero. Daniel closed his eyes and let the tears come, silent and hot, rolling down his face as he sat at his desk, surrounded by coworkers who pretended not to notice. He cried for his lost job, for his daughter's broken dreams, for every bill he wouldn't be able to pay, and every opportunity that had just evaporated. But mostly, he cried because even now, even after everything, he knew he'd make the same choice again. If he saw Claire Whitmore stranded in the rain tomorrow, he'd stop, because that was who he was. And apparently, that was exactly who the world didn't need. Daniel closed the box, picked it up, and walked to the elevator. With each step, he felt the weight of failure pressing down on him. The elevator doors opened, and he stepped inside, turning to face the office one last time. Through the glass walls of Conference Room B, he could see Hendricks laughing at something Mr. Morrison had said. Neither of them looked his way. The elevator doors closed on his career at Freshmart Regional, on 5 years of loyalty and hard work, on the promotion that would have changed everything. And all Daniel could think about was Maddie's face when he had to tell her Daddy wasn't a superhero after all. He was just unemployed. The rain had stopped by the time Daniel pulled into Mrs. Patterson's driveway, but the sky remained gray and heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. He sat in his car for a long moment, staring at the cardboard box on the passenger seat. Inside it was everything he'd accumulated in 5 years at Freshmart Regional. It looked pathetic. It looked like exactly what his career had amounted to, a few personal items that could be packed up in 5 minutes and forgotten in 6. He checked his phone. 11:47 a.m. Maddie wouldn't be home from school until 3:30. He had nearly 4 hours to figure out what he was going to tell her, 4 hours to practice smiling while his world crumbled, 4 hours to become the father she deserved instead of the failure he actually was. Daniel forced himself out of the car, leaving the box behind. He'd get it later. Right now, he couldn't bear to carry that physical reminder of his humiliation into Helen Patterson's warm, safe house. Mrs. Patterson answered on the second knock, her face brightening before confusion crossed it. Daniel, what are you doing here? I thought you had that big meeting. She stopped, really looking at him, his rumpled suit still damp, his tie a askew, his face, which probably showed exactly how he felt. "Oh, honey, come inside." "I can't stay long," Daniel said, but he followed her into the cozy living room anyway, sinking onto her floral couch as if all the strings holding him upright had been cut. "I just need a minute to think before I pick up Maddie." Helen sat beside him, her weathered hand finding his. She didn't ask what happened. She just waited, the way good teachers learn to wait, giving him space to find the words. "I got fired." The words tasted bitter. "I was late to the meeting because I stopped to help someone, and my boss fired me. 5 years of perfect service, and it all came down to 25 minutes of kindness." Helen's grip tightened on his hand. "Oh, Daniel, how am I supposed to tell Maddie? She thinks I'm a superhero. She drew me with angel wings, Helen, angel wings." His voice cracked. "And I'm just a guy who can't even keep a job, who can't provide for his daughter, who can't—" "Stop." Helen's voice was firm, the same tone she'd probably used on countless students over the years. "You stop that right now. You did the right thing, Daniel Hayes. You helped someone who needed it. That's not failure. That's integrity." "Integrity doesn't pay the mortgage." "No, but it's what your daughter will remember. Not whether you were a supervisor or an associate, but whether you were a good man." Helen stood, moving to her kitchen. "When was the last time you ate?" Daniel couldn't remember. Breakfast had been burned toast he'd thrown away. "I'm not hungry." That wasn't the question. She was already pulling out bread, lunch meat, cheese. "You need food, and you need a plan. We'll handle both." Despite himself, Daniel felt his throat tighten at her kindness. It seemed to be the theme of his day: kindness given, kindness received, and kindness that cost him everything. "I don't know where to start. The job market is brutal. I have maybe 2 months of savings if I'm careful, 3 if I'm lucky. After that, we'll figure it out." "You're not alone in this, Daniel. You've got people who care about you. You've got Maddie, and you've got skills that matter." Helen brought him a sandwich and a glass of water. "Eat. Then we'll look at job listings together." Daniel took a bite because it was easier than arguing. The sandwich tasted like cardboard, but he forced it down anyway. Helen was right about one thing. He needed to eat, needed to function, needed to be ready when Maddie got home and looked at him with those trusting eyes. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. An unknown number. Daniel almost ignored it, but something made him pick it up. "Hello? Is this Daniel Hayes?" A woman's voice, professional and warm. "Yes, this is Daniel." "Mr. Hayes, my name is Patricia Chen, and I'm calling from Community Solutions Partners. We received your resume, and we'd like to schedule an interview." Daniel sat up straighter, confusion flooding through him. "I'm sorry. I think there's been a mistake. I didn't send my resume to Community Solutions Partners." A pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "Well, we have it here in our system, submitted this morning, perhaps through a job board you registered with." "I haven't applied to anything this morning. I was—" He trailed off. He'd been getting fired this morning. "What kind of position is this?" "We're looking for a community outreach coordinator. The role involves program development, stakeholder engagement, and strategic planning to improve our service delivery. The salary range is $55,000 to $65,000, depending on experience, with full benefits." Daniel's current, former salary had been $42,000. "I don't understand. I work in retail inventory management. Why would you contact me?" "Your background shows strong organizational skills, attention to detail, and a commitment to service. Those are exactly the qualities we're looking for. Plus, you have a recommendation from someone we trust very highly." "A recommendation? From who?" Another pause. "I'm not at liberty to say, but it's someone with excellent judgment. Can you come in tomorrow for an interview, say 10 o'clock? Daniel looked at Helen, who was watching him with growing curiosity. Tomorrow he'd been planning to spend all day applying to jobs, anything that would keep the lights on. But an actual interview for a job that paid more than he'd been making? Yes, I can be there at 10. Wonderful. We're located at 450 Commerce Street, Suite 300. Ask for me at the front desk. Miss Chen, can I ask, who recommended me? I'd like to thank them. All will be revealed in time, Mr. Hayes. I'll see you tomorrow. The line went dead, and Daniel stared at his phone like it had just spoken to him in a foreign language. "What was that about?" Helen asked. "I have no idea." Daniel scrolled through his recent calls, but the number was already saved in his phone under Community Solutions Partners. "Someone submitted my resume to a nonprofit without telling me. Someone recommended me for a job I didn't apply for, and they want to interview me tomorrow." "Well," Helen smiled, "maybe your kindness is already coming back around." Daniel wanted to believe that. He wanted to believe in a universe where good deeds were rewarded instead of punished, but his experience told him to be skeptical. "It's probably a mistake. They'll realize tomorrow that I'm not qualified, and that'll be that." "Or," Helen countered, "they'll realize tomorrow that you're exactly what they need. Either way, you show up and you give it your best shot. That's all you can do." She was right, of course. Daniel finished his sandwich and spent the next few hours at Helen's kitchen table, researching Community Solutions Partners on her desktop computer. The organization was impressive, a nonprofit focused on improving community services, connecting resources with needs, and developing sustainable programs for underserved populations. Their website showed smiling faces of people they'd helped, testimonials from partner organizations, and a mission statement that actually seemed to mean something. It was the kind of place Sarah would have loved. She'd always talked about doing work that mattered, that made a real difference in people's lives. Daniel had loved Freshmart, or thought he had, because it provided stability, a paycheck, a path forward. But looking at Community Solutions Partners' work, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. At 3:15, Daniel drove to Willow Creek Elementary to pick up Maddie. He parked in the pickup line, watching the school doors, trying to compose his face into something that wouldn't worry her. He'd decided not to tell her about the firing yet. Not until he knew what came next. Why burden her with uncertainty when she'd find out soon enough? Maddie emerged in a flood of other second graders, her backpack nearly as big as she was, her hair escaping from the ponytail he'd managed this morning. When she spotted his car, her whole face lit up, and she ran toward him with the uninhibited joy only 7-year-olds possess. "Daddy! Daddy! Did you get it? Did you get the promotion?" Daniel felt his heart crack as she climbed into her booster seat. He turned around to help with her seatbelt, buying himself a few seconds to choose his words. "The meeting didn't go exactly as planned, sweetheart." Her face fell. "You didn't get it?" "Not yet, but I have another opportunity. A different job, actually. I have an interview tomorrow." "A different job?" Maddie processed this with the seriousness of someone weighing a major life decision. "Will you still be able to come to my school play?" "Of course I will. Nothing would make me miss your school play." "Okay." She brightened immediately, the way children do, moving past disappointment to the next thing. "Can we get ice cream?" Daniel checked his wallet mentally. He had $43 in cash, enough to last until his final paycheck hit his account. Ice cream would cost maybe $8 for both of them. Could he afford it? Technically, no. But could he afford to say no to Maddie right now, when his whole world was unstable and hers was about to be too? "Sure, baby. Ice cream sounds perfect." They went to Scoops and Smiles, the local ice cream shop where Maddie always ordered mint chocolate chip and Daniel always got coffee flavor. They sat at their usual table by the window, and Daniel watched his daughter attack her cone with single-minded focus, occasionally looking up to tell him about her day. And then Marcus said that his dad could beat up anybody's dad, and I said my dad has angel wings, and he said dads don't have wings, and I said mine does, and Mrs. Thompson said we should all use our inside voices. "Maddie," Daniel interrupted gently, "I'm not actually a superhero, you know. I'm just a regular dad who tries his best." She looked at him with those huge brown eyes, Sarah's eyes. "That's what makes you a superhero, Daddy. You try your best even when things are hard." Daniel had to look away, focusing on his coffee ice cream that he could barely taste. How did she do that? How did she take his brokenness and see strength? "I love you, baby girl." "I love you too, Daddy, even when you don't get promotions." They finished their ice cream and drove home, where Daniel made spaghetti for dinner, one of 3 meals he could reliably cook without ruining, and helped Maddie with her homework. The evening passed in familiar rhythms, baths and bedtime stories and tucking in, and for a few hours Daniel could almost pretend that nothing had changed. After Maddie fell asleep, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and a beer he probably shouldn't have spent money on. He pulled up his budget spreadsheet, the one he updated weekly with obsessive precision, and started running scenarios. If he didn't find a job within 2 weeks, they'd be okay. Tight, but okay. If he didn't find a job within a month, they'd have to cut everything non-essential. No more ice cream trips. No more anything beyond bare survival. If he didn't find a job within 2 months, they'd start missing bills. The car payment first, probably. Then maybe the electric. The mortgage would be last, but it would come. If he didn't find a job within 3 months, they'd lose everything. Daniel took a long drink of beer and stared at the numbers that didn't care about his good intentions or his daughter's angel wings. The universe didn't operate on karma or fairness or poetic justice. It operated on cold, hard economics. His phone buzzed. Another unknown number, but this time he recognized it before he even answered. The wet business card from Claire Whitmore was still in his jacket pocket, but he'd saved her name when she'd called earlier to... Wait. Daniel's mind raced. Patricia Chen had said someone recommended him, someone with excellent judgment. Claire Whitmore had insisted on thanking him, had pressed her business card into his hand. But that was impossible. She didn't know where he worked, what his qualifications were, His phone was still ringing. Daniel answered. Mr. Hayes? Daniel? Claire's voice, much calmer than it had been in the rain. I hope I'm not calling too late. No, I was just working on some things. How are you feeling? How's the baby? We're both fine, thanks to you. I got to my meeting on time. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that. About this morning. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? I know it's short notice, but I really need to thank you properly. Daniel thought of his interview at 10. I have something at 10, but I could meet you after. Say noon? Perfect. There's a cafe called The Daily Grind on Morrison Avenue. Do you know it? I can find it. Daniel, She paused, and he heard something in her voice he couldn't quite identify. You saved me this morning. Not just my tire, but you saved me from completely falling apart. I want you to know that. You would have been fine. You're tougher than you think. Maybe, but I didn't have to find out because you stopped. So please, let me buy you a coffee and say thank you. It's the least I can do. And they said goodbye, and Daniel added another appointment to his calendar. Interview at 10 a.m., coffee with Claire at noon. He had no idea what she wanted to say that required an in-person meeting, but he owed her the courtesy of showing up. After all, she was part of the reason he'd been fired. The least he could do was let her express her gratitude. He finished his beer and his budget calculations and went to bed, where he lay awake for hours thinking about angel wings and burned toast and whether kindness was its own reward or just a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. The next morning came too quickly. Daniel went through the same rushed routine, coffee that actually worked this time, toast that didn't burn, Maddie ready for school with only one minor crisis about mismatched socks. He dropped her at Mrs. Patterson's house, accepted Helen's thumbs up and encouraging smile, and drove to 450 Commerce Street feeling like he was heading to an execution. Community Solutions Partners occupied the entire third floor of a renovated historic building. The lobby was bright and welcoming, with photos of community projects covering the walls and a receptionist who smiled like she meant it. Daniel Hayes, I have an appointment with Patricia Chen. Of course, she's expecting you. Can I get you some water or coffee while you wait? Water would be great, thank you. Daniel sat in the waiting area, studying the photos. A community garden project, a literacy program, a job training initiative for formerly incarcerated individuals. These were the kinds of programs Sarah had dreamed about supporting, the kind of work that actually changed lives instead of just managing inventory and maximizing profits. Mr. Hayes? Patricia Chen was younger than he'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a warmer smile. Thank you for coming in on such short notice. Let's talk in my office. Her office was small but comfortable, with more photos of successful programs and a window overlooking the street below. Patricia gestured to a chair across from her desk and sat down with a folder Daniel recognized as his resume, though he still had no idea how they'd gotten it. I'll be honest with you, Daniel. May I call you Daniel? He nodded. We don't usually do things this way. Normally, we have a formal application process, multiple interview rounds, the whole 9 yards. But sometimes exceptional circumstances call for exceptional measures. I appreciate the opportunity, but I'm still not sure why I'm here. Ms. Chen, I don't have any nonprofit experience. I've worked in retail for 5 years. I don't understand what I could possibly offer your organization. Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying him. Tell me what happened yesterday morning, before you came to work. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. How do you know about that? Just humor me. Tell me what happened. So Daniel did. He told her about the rain, about Claire stranded with her flat tire, about the choice between his meeting and someone else's crisis. He told her about changing the tire in his suit, about arriving late, about getting fired. He kept his voice level, professional, but he couldn't quite keep the bitterness out when he described Hendricks telling him that kindness didn't matter. When he finished, Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a piece of paper, a crayon drawing of a stick figure with angel wings and the words, "My daddy, he helps people." Daniel's breath caught. Where did you get that? From someone who thinks very highly of you. Someone who witnessed exactly the kind of character we need in this organization. Patricia slid the drawing across the desk. This is what we hire for, Daniel. Not just skills or experience, though you have plenty of both, but values. The ability to see another person in need and choose to help, even when it costs you something, especially when it costs you something. I don't understand. Who gave you this? I think you'll find out very soon. In the meantime, let me tell you about the position. Patricia pulled out a job description, and for the next 30 minutes, she outlined a role that seemed almost too good to be true. Community outreach, program development, working with local organizations to identify needs and create solutions. It was everything Daniel hadn't known he wanted, wrapped up in a salary that would actually let him breathe. But I don't have the qualifications, Daniel insisted, even as hope bloomed treacherously in his chest. I've never done nonprofit work. I don't have a degree in social services or community development or whatever this requires. You have something better. You have empathy, organizational skills, and a track record of reliability. Your former employer may not have valued those things, but we do. Patricia smiled. I'm prepared to offer you the position, Daniel. $58,000 to start, full benefits, 3 weeks vacation. You'd start next Monday if you're interested. Daniel felt like the floor had dropped away. You're offering me the job? Right now? Without checking references or doing a background check or, oh, we'll do all that, it's standard procedure. But unless something dramatic shows up, and I don't think it will, the job is yours if you want it. Daniel's voice failed him. He looked down at Maddie's drawing, at his stick figure self with angel wings, and felt tears threatening. Can I ask why? Please, I need to understand why you're doing this. Patricia's expression softened. Because someone who knows what it's like to need help and what it takes to give it made a call on your behalf. Because in this work, character matters more than experience. And because I believe that people who do the right thing, even when it costs them, deserve a second chance. She extended her hand. What do you say, Daniel? Do you want to join our team? Daniel shook her hand, his grip probably too tight, his eyes definitely too wet. Yes. God, yes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This work isn't easy. It's long hours, difficult situations, and a lot of people depending on you to follow through. But I think you're ready for it. Patricia stood, signaling the end of the interview. Welcome to Community Solutions Partners, Daniel. HR will reach out this afternoon with paperwork. Plan on starting Monday morning, 8:30 a.m. Daniel walked out of that building in a daze, clutching Maddie's drawing like a talisman. He sat in his car for 5 minutes just trying to process what had happened. 24 hours ago, he'd been fired. Now he had a better job than the one he'd lost, with better pay, better mission, better everything. But how? And why? And who? He checked his watch. 11:15. He had 45 minutes before meeting Claire at the Daily Grind. Just enough time to call Helen and tell her the news. Helen, I got it. I got the job. Her squeal of delight made him pull the phone away from his ear. Daniel, that's wonderful. I knew it would work out. I don't understand how, though. Someone recommended me. Someone gave them Maddie's drawing. Someone orchestrated this whole thing, and I have no idea who or why. Does it matter? Sometimes we just need to accept blessings when they come. But I want to thank them. I need to know who. Daniel stopped. The business card. Claire's insistence on thanking him. The meeting this morning. Helen, I have to go. I think I'm about to get some answers. He drove to the daily grind with his mind racing. Claire was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee already ordered. She looked different in business attire, polished, professional, confident. Not at all like the desperate woman in the rain. Daniel, she stood as he approached. Thank you for coming. Of course. You said you wanted to thank me. I do. Please, sit. They both sat, and Claire pushed one of the coffee cups toward him. Black, right? You seem like a black coffee person. How did you... Lucky guess. She smiled, but there was something nervous in it. Daniel, I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how you're going to react. His stomach tightened. Okay. When you helped me yesterday, you asked about my meeting. I told you I had something critical downtown, something I couldn't miss. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. What I didn't tell you is what that meeting was, or who I am, who you are. Claire took a breath. My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm the CEO of Whitmore Holdings. The name hit Daniel like a truck. Whitmore Holdings, the parent company of Fresh Mart Regional, the corporation that owned not just his former employer, but a dozen other retail chains across 3 states. You're my boss's boss's boss. Something like that, yes. Claire's voice was gentle. I was heading to an emergency board meeting when my tire blew out. If I'd missed that meeting, we would have lost a major acquisition deal. $20 million and 300 jobs were on the line. And you saved it by stopping to help me. Daniel couldn't breathe. You own the company that fired me. I didn't know that yesterday. I didn't know you worked for us at all. But when I got home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about what you'd done. You'd sacrificed something important to help a stranger. So I called the number on my phone. You'd called me to make sure I got home safe, remember? He didn't, but he nodded anyway. I did a reverse lookup, found your name, and had my assistant do some research. Your assistant. She's very thorough. By yesterday evening, I knew your employment history, your personnel file, your performance reviews. Daniel, you had 5 years of spotless service, 5 years of perfect attendance except for one morning when your daughter was sick, 5 years of customer commendations and never a single complaint. And you were fired for being late one time because you stopped to help me. Daniel's hands were shaking. He set down his coffee before he spilled it. Why are you telling me this? Because I called Robert Hendricks last night. I asked him about your termination. Do you know what he said? Claire's eyes flashed with something dangerous. He said you were unreliable, that you'd been late multiple times, that you'd shown a pattern of putting personal matters ahead of professional responsibilities. He lied to me, Daniel. He lied to the CEO of his parent company about firing one of his best employees. So you, what? Got me the interview at Community Solutions Partners? I did more than that. I called Patricia Chen, she's a friend and someone I trust completely, and I told her about you. I gave her your file, your performance reviews, everything that showed what kind of employee you really are, and I gave her something else. Claire pulled out her phone and showed him a photo. Maddie's drawing, the one Patricia had shown him in the interview. You dropped this in the rain yesterday. I found it after you left. My daddy. He helps people. That's what decided me, Daniel. That's what made me want to do something. Daniel stared at the photo of his daughter's drawing, his vision blurring. You got me a job because of a crayon angel? I got you a job because you deserved better than what happened to you. And because I wanted to prove that sometimes, not often, but sometimes, the good guys win. Claire reached across the table and touched his hand. I'm sorry that my emergency cost you your job, Daniel, but I'm grateful that I got the chance to make it right. Make it right? You gave me a better job with better pay doing work that actually matters. That's not making it right, that's... He couldn't finish the sentence. There wasn't a word for what she'd done. There's one more thing. Claire withdrew her hand and took a sip of coffee. This morning, I fired Robert Hendricks. Daniel's head snapped up. What? He's been a problem for a while. High turnover in his department, complaints from employees that were never properly documented, a management style that prioritizes fear over results. But he was careful, never quite bad enough to justify termination, always had plausible explanations. Your case gave me the evidence I needed. Claire's expression hardened. He fired a 5-year employee with a perfect record for being 25 minutes late one time. That's not management, that's cruelty. And I don't tolerate cruelty in my company. You fired him because of me. I fired him because he earned it. You were just the final straw. Claire finished her coffee and stood. I need to get back to the office. But Daniel, I want you to know something. What you did yesterday, stopping to help me even though it cost you, that's not weakness. That's not naivety. That's the kind of character that builds good companies and good communities. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Daniel stood too, his legs unsteady. I don't know how to thank you. You already did. You changed my tire in the rain. Claire smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Besides, I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again. Community Solutions Partners does a lot of work with corporate sponsors. Whitmore Holdings is one of their biggest donors. She walked out of the cafe, leaving Daniel standing there with cold coffee and a head full of thoughts he couldn't organize. In 24 hours, he'd lost everything and gained more than he'd lost. He'd been fired and hired. He'd hit rock bottom and bounced back higher than before. And all because he'd stopped in the rain. Daniel pulled out his phone and called Helen again. You're not going to believe what just happened. Try me. He told her everything, about Claire, about Whitmore Holdings, about Hendricks getting fired. Helen listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she was quiet for so long he thought the call had dropped. Helen? That woman, Claire Whitmore. She's the one who called me this morning. What? She called me before your interview, asked if I'd be willing to provide a reference for you. I didn't know who she was or why she was asking, but I told her the truth, that you're the best father I've ever known, that you'd give your last dollar to help someone in need, that Maddie is lucky to have you. Helen's voice caught. I told her that the world needs more people like you, Daniel Hayes. Daniel sat back down at the table, his legs giving out. She called you. She did her research. She wanted to know if you were really the person you seemed to be in that parking lot, and I told her you were. Helen sniffled. I'm so proud of you, Daniel. I didn't do anything. I just helped someone change a tire. No, honey, you did something much harder than that. You chose kindness when it would have been easier to drive past. You sacrificed your own interests to help someone else. That's not nothing. That's everything. They talked for a few more minutes, Helen insisting on making Maddie's favorite dinner to celebrate, Daniel trying to process the emotional whiplash of the past day. When he hung up, he sat in the daily grind for another 20 minutes, watching people come and go, thinking about chance and choice and consequences. His phone buzzed with an email from Community Solutions Partners HR. Welcome packet, benefits enrollment, start date confirmation. It was real. All of it was real. Daniel picked up Maddie from school that afternoon with a smile he didn't have to force. When she asked about his interview, he told her it went well, that he got the job, that everything was going to be okay. I knew you would, Maddie bounced in her seat, because you're a superhero. I'm really not, baby. Yes, you are. You help people, and then good things happen. That's how superhero stories work. Daniel looked at his daughter in the rear-view mirror. This small person who believed in him with absolute certainty and felt something shift inside him. Maybe she was right. Maybe the universe did reward kindness sometimes. Maybe good deeds didn't always go punished. Or maybe he'd just gotten improbably lucky. Either way, he was grateful. That night, after Maddie was asleep, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with a beer and his laptop. He pulled up his budget spreadsheet and started adjusting the numbers. $58,000 instead of $42,000, better insurance, lower out-of-pocket costs. The difference was staggering. For the first time in 3 years, he could breathe. He could fix the heater. He could sign Maddie up for gymnastics. He could replace the coffee maker and maybe, eventually, start saving for college. He could do more than just survive. Daniel closed his laptop and pulled out Maddie's drawing, now slightly crumpled from being carried around all day. My daddy, he helps people. The stick figure with angel wings smiled up at him, rendered in hope and crayons and a 7-year-old certainty that her father was good. Maybe he wasn't a superhero. Maybe he was just a man who'd made a choice in the rain and gotten lucky. But looking at that drawing at his daughter's faith in him, Daniel decided that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Monday morning arrived with a crispness that felt like possibility. Daniel stood in front of his closet at 6 a.m., staring at the same charcoal suit he'd worn to change Claire's tire, now dry cleaned and pressed. He'd debated buying a new one with his last Freshmart paycheck, but practicality had won out. The suit was fine. It would do. Maddie appeared in his doorway, still in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Is today your first day at the new job?" "It is, baby." Daniel selected a different tie, green this time, not the blue one that had hung limp and pathetic in the rain. "What are you doing up so early?" "I wanted to make you breakfast. You know, to celebrate." She padded into the kitchen, and Daniel followed, his heart swelling at the sight of his daughter pulling out the cereal boxes with determined concentration. "I can't make eggs yet, but I can pour cereal really good." They sat together at the wobbly kitchen table, eating honey wheat puffs while the sun rose through the window. Daniel had checked his bank account that morning. His final Freshmart paycheck had cleared, and while it wasn't much, it gave them enough cushion to relax for the first time in months. He'd even splurged on real coffee beans instead of the generic brand. "Daddy?" Maddie looked at him over her cereal bowl. "Are you nervous?" "A little bit. Starting new things is always scary." "But you're good at helping people. That's what the new job is, right? Helping people?" Daniel smiled at her simple logic, her ability to reduce complex things to their essential truth. "That's exactly what it is, sweetheart." "Then you don't have to be nervous. You're already really good at it." He dropped Maddie at Mrs. Patterson's house at 7:30, endured Helen's enthusiastic hug and whispered, "You've got this," and drove to 450 Commerce Street with his hands steady on the wheel. The building looked different in the morning light, more welcoming, less imposing. Daniel parked in the visitor section, grabbed his bag, and walked through the front doors at precisely 8:25. Patricia Chen met him in the lobby, her smile as warm as it had been during the interview. "Daniel, right on time. I love that about you already." She handed him a visitor badge. "We'll get you a permanent ID card by the end of the week. Come on, let me show you to your office." "Office?" Daniel had assumed he'd have a cubicle, maybe a shared workspace. "I have an actual office?" "You're a program coordinator. Of course you have an office." Patricia led him down a hallway past the receptionist's desk, past a break room where several people were gathered around a coffee maker, past conference rooms with glass walls. She stopped at a door near the end of the hall. "Here we are. It's small, but it's yours." Small was an understatement. The office was maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, with a window overlooking the street, a desk with a computer, 2 chairs for visitors, and a bookshelf that was currently empty. But it was his. After 5 years of working at a desk in an open floor plan where everyone could hear his phone calls and read over his shoulder, this tiny room felt like a palace. "The computer password is taped underneath the keyboard. I know, terrible security, but we'll have you set up a new one today. There's a welcome packet in the top drawer with all the paperwork HR needs. And this," Patricia handed him a folder, "is the overview of your first project." Daniel opened the folder and saw a proposal for a community initiative called Bridges Forward. The goal was to connect underemployed adults with training programs and employment opportunities, creating pathways out of poverty through skills development and mentorship. It was ambitious, comprehensive, and exactly the kind of work that actually changed lives. "This is incredible," Daniel said, scanning the document. "How long has this been in development?" "About 6 months. We got funding approved last quarter, but we've been waiting for the right person to run it." Patricia leaned against his desk. "Daniel, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This program is going to be a lot of work. You'll be coordinating with multiple partner organizations, tracking dozens of participants, managing a budget, and reporting outcomes to our board of directors. It's going to be long hours and high pressure, especially in the beginning. I'm ready for that." "I believe you are. But I also want you to know that we value work-life balance here. If you need to leave early to pick up your daughter, that's fine. If you need to work from home occasionally, that's fine too. We trust you to get the job done, and we don't micromanage how you do it." Patricia's expression softened. "I know what happened at your last job, Daniel. I know you were fired for helping someone. That kind of thing doesn't happen here. We hire people we trust, and then we trust them." Daniel felt his throat tighten. Thank you. That means more than you know. Patricia pushed off from the desk. Staff meeting is at 9 in the main conference room. That'll give you a chance to meet everyone. In the meantime, get settled in, review the Bridges Forward proposal, and let me know if you have questions. After she left, Daniel sat at his desk, and took a long moment to just breathe. Through his window, he could see the street below, people walking to work, cars passing by, the ordinary rhythm of a Monday morning. But nothing about this felt ordinary. 3 days ago, he'd been unemployed and terrified. Now he sat in an office with his name on the door, working on a project that mattered. He pulled out his phone and texted Helen. First day officially started. I have an office, an actual office with a door. Her response came immediately. That's wonderful. Maddie keeps talking about how proud she is of her superhero daddy. Don't forget to eat lunch. The staff meeting at 9 was exactly what Daniel needed to feel grounded. The team at Community Solutions Partners was smaller than he'd expected, only about 15 people, but they were passionate, articulate, and genuinely committed to the work. Patricia introduced him as their new community outreach coordinator, and Daniel gave a brief summary of his background, carefully editing out the details of his firing. I'm excited to learn from all of you, he concluded. I know I have a lot to catch up on, but I'm ready to dive in. A woman named Jennifer, who ran their housing assistance program, spoke up. Patricia mentioned you came from the retail sector. What made you want to transition to nonprofit work? Daniel thought about how to answer that. He could give a polished response about wanting to make a difference, about seeking meaningful work. But something about the room, about these people who dedicated their careers to service, made him want to tell the truth. Honestly, I didn't know I wanted this until it was offered to me. I was comfortable in retail, or I thought I was, but then I lost my job for stopping to help someone, and it made me realize that I'd been working in an environment that didn't value the things I value. When Patricia called me about this position, it felt like, I don't know, like finding something I didn't know I was looking for. Jennifer smiled. That's usually how the best people end up here. Welcome to the team, Daniel. The rest of the morning was a blur of introductions, system passwords, and information overload. Daniel met with the IT manager to get set up on their database, with the finance director to review his program budget, with the communications coordinator to discuss outreach strategies. By noon, his head was spinning with names and processes and acronyms. He was eating a sandwich at his desk, turkey and cheese he'd packed himself, saved at least $8, when his office phone rang. The caller ID showed an internal extension. Daniel Hayes. Daniel, it's Patricia. Do you have a minute to come to my office? Of course. Daniel set down his sandwich and walked down the hall, trying to remember if he'd done something wrong already. Had he filled out the HR paperwork incorrectly, accessed the wrong database, said something inappropriate in the meeting? Patricia's office door was open, but she was on the phone, gesturing for him to sit. Daniel perched on the edge of the visitor chair, his nerves jangling, until she hung up and turned to him with an expression he couldn't read. Sorry about that. I wanted to give you a heads up about something before this afternoon. Patricia folded her hands on her desk. We're getting a site visit from one of our major corporate sponsors. They like to check in quarterly, see how their donation dollars are being used, meet the team. It's usually pretty informal, but I like to give people advance warning. Okay. Daniel relaxed slightly. Who's the sponsor? Whitmore Holdings. The name hit him like cold water. Daniel sat up straighter. Claire Whitmore is coming here? Not Claire herself. She usually sends her director of corporate social responsibility. But I got a call this morning that she's coming personally this time. Patricia watched him carefully. Daniel, I know that Claire recommended you for this position. And I want to be clear that I hired you because you're qualified, not as a favor to a donor. But I also want you to be prepared. When she arrives, it might be a bit awkward. Awkward how? Well, she's never visited in person before. She sends reports, writes checks, and lets us do our work. The fact that she's coming now, right after you started, is going to raise questions among the staff. People are going to wonder about the connection. Daniel felt his stomach sink. He'd been so focused on the gift of this new job that he hadn't considered how it might look to others. You think they'll assume I got the job because of her? That it wasn't merit-based? Some might. Human nature. Patricia's expression was kind but honest. I'm telling you this because I want you to be ready. and because I want you to know that I'll back you up. You earned this position, Daniel. Claire just opened the door. But she did more than that. She called you, she sent my file, she basically handed Rap the opportunity. How is that not favoritism? Because favoritism is when someone unqualified gets a position because of who they know. You were qualified. You had 5 years of excellent work history, strong organizational skills, and the exact kind of character we need on this team. Claire identified those qualities and brought them to my attention. That's not favoritism, that's networking. Patricia leaned forward. Daniel, do you think you can do this job? Yes. Do you think you'll be good at it? I hope so. Then that's all that matters. What Claire did was give you a chance to prove yourself. What happens next is entirely up to you. Daniel nodded slowly, trying to internalize her words. She was right. He knew she was right, but it didn't stop the anxiety curling in his gut. He'd been at Community Solutions Partners for exactly 4 hours, and already he was going to have to explain his connection to their biggest donor. When is she arriving? He asked. 2 o'clock. She wants to tour the facilities and meet with the program coordinators, which means you, Jennifer, and Marcus. Patricia stood, signaling the end of the conversation. Just be yourself, Daniel. That's who she hired, and that's who we need. The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Daniel tried to focus on reviewing the Bridges Forward proposal, on learning their database system, on anything that would distract him from checking the clock every 5 minutes. At 1:30, he went to the bathroom to check his appearance. Tie straight, shirt tucked in, no coffee stains. He looked professional. He looked like someone who belonged here. He just wasn't sure he believed it yet. At precisely 2 o'clock, Daniel heard a commotion in the lobby. Voices, footsteps, Patricia's welcoming tone. He stayed in his office trying to look busy with paperwork while his heart hammered against his ribs. Through his open door, he could hear the tour progressing down the hallway. And this is our resource library, where community members can access computers and job search materials. Here's Jennifer's office. She runs our housing assistance program. Marcus handles our youth mentorship initiatives. The voices grew closer. Daniel forced himself to look at his computer screen, at an email he wasn't actually reading, trying to appear calm and collected and like his world wasn't tilting on its axis. And this is Daniel Hayes, our newest team member. Daniel, I'd like you to meet Claire Whitmore. Daniel stood and turned, and there she was. Claire Whitmore looked different than she had in the rain or in the coffee shop, more polished, more composed, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than his monthly salary. Her pregnancy was more visible now, a gentle curve beneath the expensive fabric. But her eyes were the same, warm, intelligent, and slightly nervous. Miss Whitmore. Daniel extended his hand, keeping his voice professional. It's nice to see you again. Mr. Hayes. Claire shook his hand, and Daniel caught the slight emphasis on the formality. They were playing roles now, donor and employee, keeping appropriate distance. Patricia tells me you've had an excellent first day. It's been wonderful. The team here is incredibly welcoming. That's good to hear. And you're working on the Bridges Forward program? I am. It's an ambitious initiative, and I'm excited to be part of it. They maintained the careful dance of professional courtesy, discussing the program's goals and timeline, while Patricia watched with approval. To anyone observing, they were simply a donor and a new employee having a polite first meeting. No one would guess that this woman had orchestrated his hiring, had fired his former boss, had essentially saved his life. After a few minutes, Patricia moved the tour along, and Daniel sat back down at his desk feeling like he'd just passed some kind of test. He'd kept his composure, maintained professionalism, and hadn't revealed anything that would fuel speculation. But half an hour later, his office phone rang again. Patricia's extension. Daniel, can you join us in the conference room? Claire has some questions about the Bridges Forward budget that I'd like you to address. The conference room held Patricia, Claire, and Marcus, a friendly guy in his 30s who'd been enthusiastic about welcoming Daniel to the team during the morning meeting. They were gathered around a laptop, reviewing what looked like a spreadsheet. Daniel, thanks for joining us. Patricia gestured to an empty chair. Claire was asking about the allocation for participant support services, and I thought you could speak to that since you'll be managing it. Daniel sat and pulled the laptop toward him, relieved to be discussing something concrete and work-related. The budget allocated $30,000 for participant support services, things like transportation vouchers, childcare assistance, and professional clothing for job interviews. It was one of Daniel's favorite parts of the program because it addressed the practical barriers that often kept people from accessing opportunities. The way we've structured it, Daniel explained, is to provide individualized support based on need. Some participants might need help with transportation to get to training sessions. Others might need childcare to attend interviews. We're trying to remove the obstacles that prevent people from taking advantage of the program. Claire leaned forward, studying the spreadsheet. What's your average cost per participant? We're estimating about $300 per person, which gives us capacity for about 100 participants in the first year. But some will need more support and others will need less. The key is flexibility. And how do you prevent abuse of the system? What stops someone from requesting support they don't actually need? It was a fair question, and Daniel appreciated that Claire was taking her donor role seriously rather than just rubber stamping everything. We have an intake process where participants work with a case manager to identify genuine needs. We also require documentation, proof of training enrollment, interview confirmations, things like that. The goal isn't to be punitive, but to ensure resources go to people who are genuinely using them to improve their situation. Marcus jumped in. We've used similar models in the youth program, and it works really well. You build relationships with participants, and they know we're investing in them. Most people don't want to abuse a system that's actually helping them. Claire nodded slowly, making notes on her tablet. What's your backup plan if you run out of support funding before the end of the year? Daniel glanced at Patricia, who gave him an encouraging nod. We'd reassess and prioritize. Emergency needs, transportation to a job interview, for example, would take precedence over nice-to-haves. We'd also look for alternative resources. Maybe a local business could donate professional clothing, or we could partner with a childcare center for discounted rates. The budget is a framework, not a ceiling. Good answer. Claire set down her tablet and looked directly at Daniel for the first time since he'd entered the room. Mr. Hayes, Patricia tells me you have retail management experience. Have you ever run a program of this scale before? The question hung in the air, pointed and challenging. Daniel felt Marcus and Patricia watching him, waiting to see how he'd respond. This was the moment where he could deflect, could hide behind credentials he didn't have, could pretend to be more experienced than he was. Or he could tell the truth. No, ma'am, I haven't. I've never run a nonprofit program. I've never managed a budget like this. I've never coordinated with multiple partner organizations or tracked outcomes for a board of directors. Daniel kept his voice steady, meeting Claire's gaze. But I've spent 5 years managing complex inventory systems across multiple locations. I've trained new employees and mediated conflicts and solved problems that no one thought had solutions. I've learned that success isn't about having done something before. It's about being willing to learn, ask questions, and work hard. So while I don't have nonprofit experience, I have something just as valuable: the ability to figure things out and the determination to succeed. The room was quiet for a beat. Then Claire smiled, a real smile, not the polite donor smile she'd been wearing. That's exactly the right answer, Mr. Hayes. Experience is valuable, but adaptability is priceless. She turned to Patricia. I'm satisfied with the budget allocation. Whitmore Holdings will approve the full funding request. Patricia exhaled with visible relief. Thank you, Claire. That means we can launch Bridges Forward next month as planned. I have one condition. Claire's expression turned serious. I want regular updates on the program's progress, not just quarterly reports. I want to see the real impact. Success stories, challenges, lessons learned. If Whitmore Holdings is investing this much money, I want to know it's making a difference. Of course, Patricia agreed. Daniel can copy you on his monthly program reports. Actually, I'd like something more direct. Mr. Hayes, would you be willing to have monthly check-in calls with me? 30 minutes just to discuss how the program is going. Daniel felt 3 pairs of eyes on him. This was it. The moment where the connection between them would become visible to everyone. Monthly calls with the CEO of their biggest donor? That wasn't standard operating procedure. That was special treatment. But it was also an opportunity to build a relationship with a major stakeholder, to get feedback from someone who understood both business and social impact, to learn from someone who'd built a successful company from the ground up. I'd be honored, Daniel said carefully. I'm sure your insights would be valuable as we navigate the launch phase. Good. Patricia, have your assistant coordinate with mine to set up the first call for next month. Claire stood, gathering her things. Gentlemen, it was lovely meeting you both. Marcus, keep up the excellent work with the youth programs. Mr. Hayes, welcome to the team. I have a good feeling about your future here. After Claire left, Patricia walked Daniel back to his office. She didn't speak until they were behind his closed door. That went well, she said simply. Did it? Because it felt like everyone in that room knew there was more to the story. Maybe they suspected. But you handled it perfectly. You acknowledged your limitations, emphasized your strengths, and didn't try to hide behind Claire's influence. Patricia sat in one of his visitor chairs. Daniel, I'm going to be straight with you. Yes, people are going to wonder about your connection to Claire Whitmore. Yes, some might assume you got this job because of favoritism. You can't control what people think. All you can control is your work. So do excellent work, and everything else will fade into background noise. What if I mess up? What if I'm not as good at this as everyone thinks I'll be? Then you'll learn from it and do better next time. That's how everyone here operates. We try, we fail, we adjust, we improve. Perfection isn't the goal. Impact is. Patricia stood, moving toward the door. Get through your first month, Daniel, one day at a time. The rest will take care of itself. That evening, Daniel picked up Maddie from Mrs. Patterson's house with exhaustion that felt earned rather than crushing. His brain was full of new information, his notebook was covered in notes and reminders, and he had a to-do list that stretched over 2 pages. But it was good work, meaningful work, work that mattered. How was your first day, Daddy? Maddie asked as they drove home. It was really good, baby. Busy and a little overwhelming, but good. Did you help people? Daniel smiled. Not yet. Right now I'm still learning how everything works, but soon I'll be helping lots of people find jobs and learn new skills. That's so cool. You're like a job superhero. I don't know about that. I do. Mrs. Patterson says superheroes are people who help other people be better. That's exactly what you do. They stopped for groceries on the way home. Real groceries, not just the cheap staples Daniel had been buying for months. He let Maddie pick out a treat, fresh fruit instead of canned, chicken breasts instead of hot dogs. Small luxuries that had been impossible 2 weeks ago. At home, while Daniel cooked dinner, Maddie sat at the kitchen table doing homework. She worked on her math problems with fierce concentration, occasionally asking for help, and Daniel was struck by how normal this felt. How right. For the first time since Sarah died, he felt like they weren't just surviving, they were actually living. Daddy? Maddie looked up from her worksheet. Are you happy? The question surprised him. What makes you ask that? You look different, like lighter, like when you smile now it's real. Daniel set down his cooking spoon and crouched beside her chair, eye level with his daughter. I am happy, sweetheart. These past few years have been really hard, and I've been worried a lot, but things are getting better now. Because of the new job? Partly, but also because I'm learning that sometimes when bad things happen, good things can come after. I lost my old job, which was scary, but it led me to a better job where I get to do work that actually matters. Maddie processed this with the seriousness of someone much older. So the bad thing was actually good? The bad thing was still bad, but it opened a door to something good. Does that make sense? I think so. Like when Mommy died, that was really bad, but then we got closer, you and me. So something good came from something sad. Daniel felt tears prick his eyes. His 7-year-old daughter had just articulated something he'd been trying to understand for 3 years. Yeah, baby. Exactly like that. They ate dinner together, and Daniel helped with the rest of Maddie's homework, and they read stories before bed. The evening routine that had felt like an exhausting chore for so long now felt like a privilege. After Maddie fell asleep, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and reviewed his notes from the day. Bridges Forward was scheduled to launch in 4 weeks. He needed to finalize partnerships with 3 training centers, recruit a cohort of participants, coordinate with the finance team on payment schedules, and set up a tracking system for outcomes. It was a massive amount of work, and Daniel had no idea if he could actually pull it off. But he was going to try. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Claire Whitmore. Patricia gave me your cell. I wanted to say thank you for being professional today. I know the situation is complicated, but you handled it with grace." Daniel stared at the message for a long moment before responding, "Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I won't let you down." Her reply came quickly. "I know you won't. That's why I recommended you. Sleep well, Daniel. You've earned it." He set down his phone and looked around his small kitchen, at the bills that were finally manageable, at the refrigerator now stocked with real food, at Maddie's latest drawings covering every available surface. This was his life now. Not perfect, but stable. Not easy, but meaningful. And it had all started with a choice in the rain. The next few weeks blurred together in a chaos of learning curves and long days. Daniel threw himself into Bridges Forward with single-minded intensity, determined to prove that he deserved this position. He met with training center directors to negotiate partnership terms. He developed an intake assessment to identify participant needs. He created a database to track progress and outcomes. He worked early mornings and late nights, stealing hours after Maddie went to bed, driven by equal parts passion and fear of failure. The rest of the team at Community Solutions Partners embraced him warmly, though Daniel sometimes caught speculative looks when Claire's name came up in conversation. He ignored them, focusing instead on building relationships through competence. Jennifer sought his input on a housing program proposal. Marcus invited him to lunch to discuss collaboration opportunities. Even the finance director complimented his budget tracking. 3 weeks into his new job, Daniel held the first information session for prospective Bridges Forward participants. 15 people showed up to the community center where they'd rented space. 15 adults who'd been underemployed or unemployed, who were struggling to make ends meet, who were looking for a way forward. Daniel stood in front of them and saw himself 3 weeks ago, desperate and uncertain and hoping for a chance. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. "I know what it's like to wonder if things will ever get better. I know what it's like to work hard and still fall short. 4 weeks ago, I lost my job. I thought it was the end of everything. But someone gave me a second chance, and now I'm here to offer that same chance to you." He outlined the program. Skills training in high-demand fields, job placement assistance, wraparound support services to address barriers. He answered questions about eligibility and time commitment and whether this was really free or if there was some catch they weren't seeing. "There's no catch," Daniel assured them. "The only requirement is that you're willing to show up and do the work. We're investing in you because we believe you're worth investing in. All we ask is that when you succeed, and you will succeed, you remember this feeling and help someone else when you can." After the session, 7 people signed up on the spot. 7 lives that could change trajectory. 7 families that might find stability. It wasn't 100 participants, but it was a start. Daniel called Patricia on his drive home. "We have our first cohort." "That's wonderful. How many?" 7. "I know it's not as many as we hoped." "Daniel, 7 is perfect for a pilot group. We can give them intensive support, work out the kinks in our processes, and build momentum for the next cohort. This is exactly how sustainable programs grow." That night, Daniel allowed himself to feel proud. Not proud enough to be complacent, but proud enough to believe he might actually be good at this work. His first monthly call with Claire was scheduled for the following Monday. Daniel prepared extensively, creating a detailed report on program launch activities, participant demographics, and early challenges. When his office phone rang at the appointed time, he answered on the first ring. "Claire, good morning." "Good morning, Daniel. How's the program going?" Her voice was warm but professional, the CEO tone he was getting used to. "Really well. We have 7 participants in our pilot cohort, all enrolled in training programs. 2 in healthcare, 3 in IT, and 2 in skilled trades. Demographically, we're serving 5 single parents, 1 formerly incarcerated individual, and 1 person with disabilities. Average age is 34. That's excellent diversity. Have you encountered any challenges?" Daniel appreciated that she didn't just want to hear about successes. A few. 1 participant needed emergency childcare funding within the first week because her regular sitter fell through. We hadn't anticipated how quickly those needs would arise. Also, coordinating schedules between 3 different training centers has been more complex than expected. Everyone has different start dates and hours. How did you handle the childcare situation? We approved the emergency funding and connected her with a backup childcare network that offers sliding scale rates. Long term, we're exploring partnerships with local childcare centers to have priority slots available for our participants. Smart. He could hear the approval in her voice. And the scheduling coordination? I built a master calendar that syncs with all 3 training centers and set up weekly check-ins with each site coordinator. It's time-intensive, but it's working. They talked for 45 minutes, 15 minutes longer than scheduled, discussing program logistics, participant outcomes, and lessons learned. Claire asked penetrating questions that revealed her deep understanding of both business operations and social services. She challenged his assumptions, pushed him to think bigger, and praised his problem-solving. "Daniel, I'm impressed," she said as the call wound down. "You've accomplished in 3 weeks what I expected might take 2 months. The program is in excellent hands." "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." There was a pause, and when Claire spoke again, her voice had shifted to something more personal. "How are you doing? Really doing? I know the transition from retail to nonprofit is significant." Daniel glanced at his closed office door, making sure no one was in earshot. "Honestly, I love it. It's challenging and sometimes overwhelming, but I wake up every morning excited about the work. I haven't felt that way about a job in maybe ever. I'm glad. You deserve work that fulfills you." Another pause. "I meant what I said in the rain, Daniel. The world needs more people like you, people who choose kindness even when it costs them something. I'm just grateful I got to be part of giving you a platform to make a difference." After they hung up, Daniel sat at his desk feeling energized rather than drained. Working with Claire wasn't about favoritism or special treatment. It was about having a mentor who believed in him, who challenged him to be better, who saw potential he sometimes doubted himself. That evening, he picked up Maddie from gymnastics class. The sparkly leotard she'd dreamed about had become a reality 2 weeks ago, and listened to her chatter about learning cartwheels and beam walks. She was thriving in ways that broke his heart with gratitude. "Daddy, can we invite Mrs. Patterson for dinner this weekend? I want to show her my new routine." "That's a great idea, baby. I'll call her tonight." On Saturday, Helen Patterson came for dinner, bringing her famous apple pie and warm hugs for both of them. Daniel cooked his best attempt at pot roast, and they ate at the kitchen table while Maddie regaled Helen with every detail of her gymnastics class. After dinner, Maddie performed her routine in the living room, her movements still clumsy but filled with joy, and Helen applauded like she was watching the Olympics. Later, while Maddie watched a movie, Daniel and Helen cleaned up the kitchen together. "You look good, Daniel," Helen said, handing him a dish to dry. "Settled, like you finally found your footing." "I feel that way. It's strange. A month ago I thought my life was falling apart. Now everything feels like it's coming together." That's what happens when you trust the process. When you do the right thing and have faith that it'll work out somehow. Helen paused, her hands in the soapy water. "Sarah would be so proud of you, you know, of how you've raised Maddie, of this new career, of the man you've become." Daniel felt his throat tighten. They didn't talk about Sarah often. It was still too raw, too painful, but when they did, Helen always seemed to know exactly what to say. "I hope so. I think about her every day. Wonder what she'd think about all of this." "She'd think you're doing exactly what you should be doing, helping people, raising your daughter right, choosing kindness over convenience." Helen dried her hands and turned to face him. "That day in the rain when you stopped to help Claire? Sarah was right there with you, Daniel. All those values she loved about you, they're still there, still guiding you. And now they're guiding Maddie, too." That night, after Helen left and Maddie was asleep, Daniel sat on his back porch in the cool October air and thought about the past month, about choices and consequences, about kindness and karma, about the strange way that life sometimes worked out when you least expected it. His phone buzzed with an email from Patricia. Claire just approved funding for a second Bridges Forward cohort starting in January, 25 participants. "Congratulations, Daniel. You're changing lives." Daniel read the message 3 times, letting it sink in. 25 more people would get a chance. 25 more families might find stability. And it was happening because he'd stopped in the rain one morning to help a stranger change a tire. He pulled out his wallet and found Maddie's drawing, now carefully laminated to preserve it. My daddy, he helps people. The stick figure with angel wings smiled up at him, rendered in hope and crayons and a 7-year-old's absolute certainty. Maybe he wasn't a superhero. Maybe he was just a man who'd made a choice and gotten extraordinarily lucky. But sitting there in the darkness, with his daughter asleep inside and a future that finally felt secure, Daniel decided that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything he had ever wanted and didn't know he could have. The success of Bridges Forward spread faster than Daniel anticipated. By mid-November, local news outlets had started calling, wanting to feature the program. A reporter from the Missouri Tribune showed up at the community center during a training session, taking photos of participants working on computer skills and conducting interviews. Daniel tried to stay in the background, deflecting attention to the participants whose lives were actually changing, but the reporter was persistent. Mr. Hayes, our readers want to know about the people behind programs like this. You've only been here 2 months, but you've already made significant impact. What's your secret? Daniel thought about how to answer that without revealing too much. There's no secret. We just treat people with dignity and give them the tools they need to succeed. Everyone wants to do better. They just need opportunity and support. The article ran the following Sunday with the headline, New Program Offers Second Chances to Struggling Workers. It was a beautiful piece highlighting 3 participants and their journeys. But there was also a photo of Daniel at his desk, looking thoughtful, with a caption identifying him as the program coordinator. And buried in the 7th paragraph was a sentence that made Daniel's stomach drop. Hayes came to Community Solutions Partners after leaving a retail management position, bringing fresh perspective to nonprofit work. His phone rang within an hour of the article posting online. Patricia, have you seen the Tribune piece? I'm reading it now. Daniel scrolled through the article on his laptop, his coffee growing cold beside him. Maddie was at a friend's birthday party, giving him a rare Sunday morning alone. It's good coverage for the program. It is. We've already had 5 inquiries about the next cohort, but Daniel, there's something you should know. Patricia's tone shifted to cautious. I got a call this morning from a blogger who writes about corporate philanthropy. He's asking questions about your connection to Claire Whitmore. Daniel felt ice settle in his chest. What kind of questions? About how you got hired, about Claire's involvement in the recruitment process, about whether Whitmore Holdings influenced our hiring decisions. He's implying that there might be impropriety, that maybe Claire used her donor status to get you a job you weren't qualified for. That's not what happened. I know that, you know that, but perception matters, Daniel. This blogger, his name is Richard Marsh, he's got a following in nonprofit circles. If he publishes something suggesting that our hiring practices are influenced by donors, it could damage the organization's reputation. And yours. Daniel stood and paced his small living room, his mind racing. What do we do? Nothing yet. I told him we don't comment on personnel matters, but he's digging, and he's going to find out about your termination from Freshmart, about Claire's recommendation, about the timing of everything. The story is going to come out one way or another. The question is how we want it told. The truth. We tell the truth. The truth is complicated, Daniel, and complicated doesn't always play well in headlines. They talked for another 20 minutes, strategizing about how to handle potential fallout. Patricia assured him that the organization stood behind his hiring, that his work spoke for itself, that this would probably blow over. But Daniel could hear the worry beneath her reassurances. After they hung up, Daniel sat on his couch, staring at the Tribune article, at his photo, at the innocent summary of his background that left out every important detail. He thought about calling Claire to warn her, but what would he say? That helping him might now damage her reputation and her company's philanthropic efforts. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Hayes, this is Richard Marsh with Nonprofit Watchdog. I'm writing a piece about Community Solutions Partners' hiring practices. I'd like to get your perspective. Can we talk? Daniel stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the reply button. Every instinct told him to ignore it, to let Patricia and the organization's communications team handle it. But another part of him, the part that valued transparency and honesty, wanted to tell his own story before someone else twisted it. He typed back, I'm willing to talk, but only if you're interested in the full story, not just a sensational headline. The response came immediately. I'm interested in the truth. Can you meet tomorrow? 10 a.m. at the Daily Grind? Daniel agreed before he could second-guess himself. Then he called Patricia back. I'm meeting with Richard Marsh tomorrow morning. Daniel, I don't think that's a good idea. Let me have our PR consultant handle this. With respect, Patricia, this is my story. And if someone's going to tell it, it should be me. Daniel kept his voice calm but firm. I'm not going to lie or deflect. I'm going to tell him exactly what happened, that I stopped to help someone, that I got fired for it, and that the person I helped gave me a second chance. If that's a scandal, then I'll live with the consequences. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. You're sure about this? I'm sure. Then I trust your judgment. But Daniel, be careful. Journalists are good at twisting words to fit their narrative. That evening, after picking up Maddie from the birthday party and listening to her excited recounting of games and cake, Daniel tried to focus on normal Sunday evening activities. But his mind kept circling back to the meeting tomorrow, to all the ways this could go wrong, to the possibility that his moment of kindness might ultimately destroy the opportunity it had created. He was tucking Maddie into bed when she asked, Daddy, are you worried about something? Daniel smoothed her hair back from her forehead, marveling at her perceptiveness. A little bit, baby. There's someone who wants to write a story about me, and I'm not sure if it'll be a nice story or a mean one. Why would anyone write a mean story about you? You're a good person. Sometimes people don't see the whole picture. They only see part of it, and they make up their mind without knowing everything. Maddie frowned, processing this with her 7-year-old wisdom. Like when Marcus at school said I cheated on the spelling test because I got all the words right. But really I just studied really hard? Exactly like that. Well, you should just tell them the truth. That's what Mrs. Baz Thompson says. The truth always comes out eventually. Daniel kissed her forehead. You're a smart kid, you know that? I know. You tell me all the time. After Maddie fell asleep, Daniel sat at his kitchen table and did something he hadn't done since Sarah died. He wrote in the journal she'd given him years ago. The pages were mostly blank, a testament to his inability to process emotions through writing. But tonight he needed to organize his thoughts, to clarify what he wanted to say tomorrow. He wrote about that morning in the rain, about the choice between his meeting and someone else's crisis. He wrote about getting fired, about the fear and humiliation. He wrote about Claire's phone call, about the interview, about discovering that the woman he'd helped owned the company that had destroyed him. He wrote about the past 2 months, the work, the satisfaction, the feeling of finally doing something that mattered. And he wrote about what he'd learned, that kindness wasn't transactional, that you didn't help people because you'd be rewarded, that the right thing was still the right thing even when it cost you everything. By the time he closed the journal, it was past midnight, and Daniel felt clearer than he had all day. Whatever Richard Marsh wrote, whatever consequences followed, Daniel knew his truth, and that would have to be enough. The Daily Grind was nearly empty when Daniel arrived at 10 the next morning. Richard Marsh was already there, sitting at a corner table with a laptop and a coffee. He was younger than Daniel expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a calculating expression that put Daniel immediately on guard. Mr. Hayes, thank you for meeting me. Marsh stood and shook Daniel's hand with a grip that was slightly too firm. Can I get you a coffee? I'm fine, thanks. Daniel sat across from him, keeping his posture open and his expression neutral. Before we start, I want to be clear about something. I'm here to tell you the truth about what happened. I'm not here to spin anything or protect anyone, but I also expect you to be fair in how you present that truth. Marsh smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm always fair, Mr. Hayes. I just follow the facts wherever they lead. Good. Then let's start with the facts. Daniel pulled out his phone and opened his notes app, where he'd outlined the timeline. On October 22nd, I was driving to work for an important presentation. I saw a pregnant woman stranded on the highway in the rain. I stopped to help her change her tire. Because of that, I arrived at work 25 minutes late and was fired by my supervisor. Marsh was typing rapidly on his laptop. And this woman was Claire Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Holdings? I didn't know who she was at the time. She was just someone who needed help. But you found out later? Yes. She called me the next day to thank me. During our conversation, she learned I'd been fired. She was upset about it and asked for my employment information. Why would she ask for that if she wasn't planning to intervene? Daniel met Marsh's gaze steadily. Because she believed what happened to me was wrong, and because she was in a position to do something about it. So she got you a job at Community Solutions Partners, an organization that receives significant funding from Whitmore Holdings. She recommended me for a position. Patricia Chen, the executive director, made the hiring decision based on my qualifications. Marsh leaned back, a skeptical expression on his face. Mr. Hayes, you have to admit it looks suspicious. A major donor's CEO personally recommends someone with no nonprofit experience for a senior position at an organization that depends on her funding. How is that not a conflict of interest? Because I was qualified for the position. I had 5 years of management experience, strong organizational skills, and a track record of reliability. Claire didn't create a job for me. There was already an open position. She just made sure my resume got seen. But would you have gotten that job without her intervention? Daniel considered the question honestly. Probably not. My resume would have been one of hundreds. But that's how networking works in any field. People recommend qualified candidates they know. The difference is that I proved I deserved the opportunity. Have you? 2 months isn't very long. Long enough to launch a successful program that's already changing lives. Long enough to secure funding for a second cohort. Long enough to build relationships with partner organizations and earn the trust of my colleagues. Daniel kept his voice calm, refusing to rise to the bait. Mr. Marsh, I understand what you're trying to do. You want a scandal, the story of a corrupt CEO using donor money to give special favors to people she likes. But that's not what happened here. Then what did happen? I made a choice to help someone when they needed it. That choice cost me my job. And the person I helped, who happened to have resources and influence, chose to give me a second chance. If that's corruption, then I guess I'm guilty, but I call it gratitude and human decency. Marsh studied him for a long moment. You really believe that, don't you? That this is just a heartwarming story about kindness being rewarded? No, I believe it's a story about a broken system that punishes people for having humanity. I believe it's about how difficult it is for anyone to get ahead without connections and lucky breaks. I believe it's about the fact that I'm one of the fortunate few who got a second chance, while thousands of other people get fired for minor infractions and never recover. Daniel leaned forward, If you want to write about something that matters, write about that. Write about how the woman I helped had just as much at stake that morning as I did. How being late to her meeting could have cost jobs and livelihoods. How we live in a world where kindness is a luxury most people can't afford. Write about how rare it is for someone with power to use it to help rather than hurt. That's quite a speech. It's the truth, and you said you follow the truth wherever it leads. Marsh was quiet, his fingers still on his keyboard. When he finally spoke, his tone had shifted slightly. Tell me about Bridges Forward. What does the program actually do? For the next 30 minutes, Daniel walked Marsh through the program, its structure, its participants, its early successes and challenges. He showed him data on job placements, on families moving out of poverty, on children who now had stability because their parents found better employment. He introduced Marsh to the truth of his work, the reality that was so much more compelling than any scandal. Can I meet some of the participants? Marsh asked. Would they be willing to talk to me? I'd have to ask them. Some might be if they believe you're genuinely interested in their stories rather than just looking for ammunition against Claire Whitmore. I am interested. Marsh gestured at his laptop. This is more interesting than what I thought I'd find. Which was? Honestly, I expected to find evidence of nepotism, of a CEO using charitable giving to benefit herself somehow. I expected you to be evasive or defensive, but you're neither of those things. Marsh closed his laptop. Mr. Hayes, I'm going to be straight with you. I write about nonprofit accountability because I care about the sector. I want to expose real corruption when it exists. But I also want to highlight programs that work, leaders who do good work for the right reasons. Based on this conversation, I think you might be one of those leaders. Daniel felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. So you're not writing a hit piece? I'm writing the truth, which is more nuanced than a scandal, but probably more important. Marsh stood, extending his hand. Thank you for your time, Mr. Hayes. I'd like to follow up in a few weeks, see how the program progresses. Would that be all right? That would be fine. After Marsh left, Daniel sat alone at the table for a few minutes, processing what had just happened. He'd gone into that meeting expecting a fight, expecting to have his words twisted and his motives questioned. Instead, he'd found someone willing to listen, to consider complexity, to see beyond the surface narrative. He called Patricia on his way back to the office. The meeting with Marsh went better than expected. I think he's going to write a fair piece. That's a relief. Daniel, I want you to know that even if he'd written something negative, we would have stood by you. Your work here speaks for itself. I appreciate that. But Patricia, this whole situation made me realize something. We need to be more transparent about how we operate, about how hiring decisions get made, about our relationships with donors. Not because we're doing anything wrong, but because perception matters. You're absolutely right. Let's talk about that at the next staff meeting. The article published 3 days later with the headline, When Kindness Creates Opportunity, inside one nonprofit's unconventional hiring story. It was balanced and thoughtful, acknowledging the unusual circumstances of Daniel's hiring while focusing primarily on Bridges Forward's impact. Marsh had interviewed 2 participants, both of whom spoke glowingly about the program and Daniel's dedication. But the article also raised broader questions about networking, privilege, and access to opportunities. It noted that Daniel had been lucky, that he'd helped someone with the resources to help him back, and questioned what happened to all the people who showed kindness without such fortunate outcomes. The response was immediate and polarizing. Some commenters praised Claire for using her influence to reward good character. Others argued that it was exactly the kind of insider dealing that perpetuated inequality. Several people demanded more information about Community Solutions Partners' hiring practices. A few suggested that Daniel should resign to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Daniel read every comment, absorbing both the praise and the criticism. The negative responses stung, but they also made him think. He had been lucky, extraordinarily, improbably lucky. And while he hadn't done anything wrong, he understood the frustration of people who saw his story as another example of how opportunities went to those with connections rather than those who needed them most. That evening, he found himself on the phone with Claire for the first time since the article published. She called him directly, bypassing their usual formal monthly check-ins. Daniel, I just read the Marsh piece. Are you okay? I'm fine. It could have been much worse. The comments section is brutal. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. Daniel walked out to his back porch, needing the cold November air to clear his head. Claire, can I ask you something honestly? Of course. Do you think I deserve this job? Not whether I'm doing good work now, but whether I deserve the opportunity in the first place. Claire was quiet for a moment. That's a complicated question. I know, that's why I'm asking. Did you deserve to be fired for helping me? Absolutely not. Did you deserve a chance to prove yourself in meaningful work? Absolutely yes. Did you deserve to skip over other equally qualified candidates who never got their resumes seen? That's where it gets murky. Claire's voice was thoughtful, honest. Daniel, I used my privilege and influence to help you. That's an uncomfortable truth. I could justify it by saying you had exceptional character, that you'd proven your values in a moment of crisis, that I was righting a wrong. All of that is true. But it's also true that I had the power to make a phone call that changed your life, and most people don't have access to that kind of power. So what do we do with that? How do I justify accepting an opportunity that came through privilege rather than merit? By doing exactly what you're doing, by working harder than anyone expects, by using this platform to create opportunities for people who don't have connections or lucky breaks, by being transparent about your story and acknowledging that yes, you got lucky, and yes, the system is unfair, and yes, you're going to spend your career trying to make it less unfair for others. Daniel leaned against the porch railing, watching his breath fog in the cold air. Some people are saying I should resign. Do you want to resign? No, God, no. I love this work. I believe in it. But I don't want my presence to damage the organization's reputation or undermine the program's credibility. Then don't resign. Stay and prove them wrong. Show them that you're not just someone who got a job through connections. Show them you're someone who deserved the opportunity and made the most of it. Claire paused. Daniel, I've been thinking about this a lot since the article came out, and I want to do something that might help address some of these concerns. What's that? I want to create a formal initiative, something we're calling Lily's Wings, named after your daughter's drawing. It would be a program through Whitmore Holdings, where we identify and support individuals who demonstrate exceptional character but lack traditional opportunities. We'd partner with organizations like Community Solutions Partners to create pathways for people who might never get their resume seen otherwise. Daniel felt his chest tighten. You want to formalize what you did for me? Exactly. Instead of it being a one-time favor to someone I happen to meet, it becomes a systematic approach to identifying and supporting people with strong values. We'd have an application process, clear criteria, transparency about how decisions get made. It wouldn't eliminate the privilege I have to make these opportunities happen, but it would democratize access to that privilege. That's incredible, Claire. I need your help making it work. You'd be the public face of the program, the proof that it can succeed. You'd help design the selection criteria, train the people who evaluate candidates, maybe even serve on the selection committee. It would be additional work on top of your role at Community Solutions Partners, and I'd compensate you fairly for your time. What do you think? Daniel thought about Maddie's drawing, about his stick figure self with angel wings, about all the people out there who just needed someone to take a chance on them. I think it's brilliant and terrifying and exactly the kind of response we need to this controversy. Good, because I'm announcing it at our quarterly board meeting next week. I'd like you to be there. Me? At a Whitmore Holdings board meeting? You're the reason this program exists. Your story is what inspired it. You should be there when we launch it. They talked for another hour, sketching out ideas for how Lily's Wings might work, what criteria they'd use, how they'd partner with organizations to create opportunities. By the time they hung up, Daniel felt energized rather than defensive. The criticism of his hiring hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something productive, a broader conversation about access and opportunity that could lead to real change. The next morning at Community Solutions Partners, Daniel called a team meeting. Everyone gathered in the conference room, and he could see the curiosity and concern on their faces. They'd all read the article. They'd all seen the comments. They were wondering if their new colleague was going to become a liability. I want to address the elephant in the room, Daniel began, standing at the head of the table. The nonprofit watchdog article raised legitimate questions about how I got hired. Some of you might be wondering if I deserve this position, if my relationship with Claire Whitmore creates conflicts of interest, if my presence here damages the organization's credibility. He had their full attention now. Jennifer sat forward in her chair. Marcus had put down his phone. Even Patricia watched him with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. Here's what I want you to know. Yes, Claire Whitmore recommended me for this position. Yes, I got hired under unusual circumstances. Yes, I benefited from privilege and access that most people don't have. All of that is true, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Daniel met each person's eyes in turn. But what's also true is that I've worked my ass off these past 2 months. I've proven that I can do this work, that I care about this mission, that I deserve to be on this team, not because of who recommended me, but because of what I've accomplished since I got here. Nobody here doubts that, Jennifer said quietly. Your work speaks for itself, Daniel. Maybe, but perception matters, and I understand that my presence might create complications for the organization. So I want to be clear, if any of you feel that my being here damages Community Solutions Partners' reputation or makes your work harder, I need you to tell me. Patricia needs to know, the board needs to know, because this organization is bigger than any one person, including me. Patricia stood, moving to stand beside Daniel. I appreciate Daniel's transparency, and I want to add something. Yes, his hiring was unconventional, but I made the final decision to bring him on board, and I made that decision based on his qualifications and character, not donor pressure. I've been in this field for 20 years, and I've seen every kind of hiring scenario imaginable. Daniel's situation was unusual, but it wasn't improper, and his performance has exceeded every expectation. Marcus raised his hand. Can I say something? Of course, Patricia said. I've worked here for 5 years, and I've seen a lot of people come through that door. Some stay, some don't. The ones who stay are the ones who care, who see this work as more than just a job. Marcus looked at Daniel. Man, you care. That's obvious to everyone on this team. I don't care how you got hired. I care that you're here now doing good work, making this organization stronger. Everything else is just noise. Several people nodded in agreement. Even Jennifer, who Daniel knew had been quietly skeptical about his hiring, smiled and said, "Marcus is right. Welcome to the team, Daniel. For real this time." The tension in the room dissipated, replaced by something warmer and more solid. They spent the rest of the meeting discussing program updates, upcoming deadlines, and collaborative opportunities. By the time they dispersed back to their offices, Daniel felt like he'd crossed some invisible threshold, from the new guy with a questionable backstory to a genuine member of the team. But the controversy wasn't over. That afternoon, Daniel received an email from someone named Robert Hendricks, his former boss. The subject line read, "We need to talk." Daniel stared at the email for a full minute before opening it. His finger hovered over the delete button. He owed Hendricks nothing, wanted nothing from him, but curiosity won out. "Mr. Hayes, I read about your new position with great interest. I'm sure you're enjoying your success, built as it is on lies and manipulation. You and Ms. Whitmore make quite a team, both willing to destroy people's careers to serve your own interests. I lost my job because of you, because of whatever story you told her about that morning. But the truth will come out eventually. And when it does, everyone will see you for what you really are. An opportunist who used a chance encounter to advance yourself at others' expense. Congratulations on your success. I hope it was worth it. Robert Hendricks." Daniel read the email twice, feeling a mixture of anger and something uncomfortably close to guilt. Hendricks had been fired. He'd lost his job the same way Daniel had, except his firing had been Daniel's doing, at least indirectly. Claire had fired Hendricks because of how he'd treated Daniel, because of a pattern of behavior that Daniel's case had finally exposed. But still, a man had lost his livelihood. A man was angry and hurt and looking for someone to blame. Daniel forwarded the email to Patricia with a brief note. "Received this from my former supervisor at Freshmart. Not sure if it's something we need to be concerned about, but I wanted you to be aware." Patricia called him 5 minutes later. "Daniel, this is concerning. He's clearly bitter, and bitter people sometimes do irrational things. Do you think he'd try to damage the organization?" "I don't know, but I'm forwarding this to our legal counsel just to have it documented. In the meantime, don't respond to him. Don't engage at all. If he reaches out again, forward it to me immediately." That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Hendricks, about the chain of consequences that had started with a flat tire in the rain. Daniel had been fired, which led to Claire helping him, which led to Hendricks being fired, which had apparently led to Hendricks losing everything the way Daniel almost had. Was Daniel responsible for that? Had his story cost an innocent man his career? Except Hendricks wasn't innocent. Patricia had said as much, that he'd been a problem for a while, that there had been complaints and high turnover, that Daniel's case was just the final straw. Claire had said the same thing. Hendricks had earned his termination through years of poor management and cruel decisions, but Daniel still felt the weight of it. Someone else's life had been destroyed in the process of saving his own. Around 2 a.m., he got up and padded to the kitchen, making chamomile tea he didn't really want. He pulled out Sarah's journal and wrote about guilt and responsibility, about the messy reality of consequences that weren't entirely your fault, but also weren't entirely separate from your choices. He was still writing when his phone buzzed with a text from Claire. "Can't sleep either? Hendricks sent me a similar email. I'm sorry you're dealing with this." Daniel typed back, "Did we do the right thing? I keep wondering if there was a way to help me without hurting him." Her response took a few minutes. "I've been asking myself the same question. The truth is, I don't know. Maybe there was another way. But Daniel, he made his own choices. He chose to fire you instead of showing understanding. He chose to lie to me about your performance. He chose a management style that hurt people. We didn't create those choices. We just responded to them. But he lost everything, just like I almost did. Yes. And unlike you, he hasn't found anyone willing to give him a second chance. That's not our fault, but it is unfortunate. The world isn't fair, Daniel. We both know that. Sometimes good people suffer for no reason. Sometimes bad people face consequences they deserve. And sometimes it's impossible to tell the difference. Daniel set down his phone and returned to the journal, but the words wouldn't come anymore. He was too tired, too conflicted, too aware of the complexity of a situation he'd once thought was simple. He'd stopped to help someone. That was good. Everything else, the firing, the hiring, the opportunity, the controversy, the consequences for Hendricks, all of that was the messy reality that followed one moment of kindness. The next week, Daniel attended Claire's board meeting at Whitmore Holdings headquarters, a gleaming downtown building that made him feel simultaneously underdressed and overwhelmed. Claire met him in the lobby, her pregnancy now impossible to hide, her professional warmth helping him relax. "Thank you for coming," she said, guiding him to the elevator. "The board is eager to hear about Lily's Wings directly from you." "I'm nervous," Daniel admitted. "Don't be. Just tell them your story. That's all they need to hear." The boardroom was intimidating. Massive windows overlooking the city, a table that could seat 20, portraits of previous CEOs on the walls. 12 board members sat waiting, all older than Daniel, all successful in ways he could only imagine. Claire introduced him simply. "This is Daniel Hayes. His story is why we're proposing Lily's Wings." And Daniel told them everything. About the rain, about the choice, about getting fired and almost losing everything. About Claire's phone call, about the second chance, about Bridges Forward and the lives changing because someone had believed in him. About Maddie's drawing and the responsibility he felt to pay forward what he'd been given. When he finished, the room was silent. Then a woman at the far end of the table, the board chair, Daniel thought, spoke. "Mr. Hayes, your story is compelling, but I'm concerned about scalability. How do we identify people like you? How do we separate genuine character from people who are simply good at telling stories?" It was the question Daniel had been expecting, the one that kept him up at night. "Honestly, I don't think you can always tell the difference. Character reveals itself over time, through choices and actions, not through interviews or applications. The best we can do is create opportunities for people to prove themselves, provide support during that proof period, and be willing to acknowledge when we make mistakes." "So you're saying there's no foolproof system?" "I'm saying that any system designed to help people will occasionally help the wrong people, but that shouldn't stop us from trying. The alternative, only helping people who can prove they deserve it before they get any help, that guarantees we'll miss most of the people who need us most." Another board member, an older man with kind eyes, leaned forward. "What would you say to critics who argue that Lily's Wings is just a way to legitimize nepotism and favoritism?" "I'd say they're not entirely wrong." Daniel felt Claire stiffen beside him, but he continued. "Access to opportunity in America is largely about who you know. Lily's Wings doesn't eliminate that reality. It just tries to expand who gets access to powerful networks. Yes, it's still privileged people deciding who deserves help, but it's better than powerful people only helping other powerful people, which is what usually happens." The kind-eyed board member smiled. "That's a refreshingly honest answer, Mr. Hayes." The board voted unanimously to approve Lily's Wings, with a budget of $500,000 for the first year. Daniel walked out of that building feeling like he'd just witnessed something important, not perfect, not a complete solution to systemic inequality, but a genuine attempt to make things slightly better. On the drive home, Claire called him, "You were perfect in there, honest, thoughtful, real. That's exactly what they needed to hear." "I just told them the truth." "That's what made it perfect." She paused. "Daniel, there's something else I need to tell you. Something I probably should have mentioned before the board meeting." His stomach tightened. "What's that?" "I'm going on maternity leave in 3 weeks. The baby's due in early January, and I'll be out for at least 2 months. During that time, my COO will handle most corporate decisions. But for Lily's Wings specifically, I'd like you to be the primary point of contact." "Me?" "Claire, I can't run a corporate initiative. I barely know what I'm doing with my own job." "You won't be running it alone. We'll have a team, HR people, program staff, communications specialists, but I want you to be the face of it, the person who evaluates candidates and tells their stories and keeps the mission front and center. You're the living proof that this approach works. People need to see that." Daniel thought about his workload, about Maddie, about all the ways this could go wrong. But he also thought about the 7 people in his Bridges Forward cohort, about the 25 more starting in January, about all the potential participants for Lily's Wings who are out there right now, working hard and doing the right thing and getting nowhere because they lacked connections. Okay, he said. I'll do it. Thank you, Daniel. I can't think of anyone better. That evening, Daniel told Maddie about the board meeting and the new initiative over dinner at their kitchen table. She listened with rapt attention, asking questions about how they'd find people to help and whether she could help pick them. It's a grown-up job, baby, but you inspired it. Remember your drawing of me with angel wings? The one where I said you help people? That's the one. Miss Whitmore liked it so much that she named the whole program after it. It's called Lily's Wings. Maddie's face lit up. Really? My drawing is famous? Very famous. It's going to be the logo for the program. She was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the seriousness of someone who suddenly understood the weight of influence. Then she looked at Daniel with those huge brown eyes, Sarah's eyes, and said, "Daddy, does this mean we have to help even more people now?" "I think it does, baby." "Good," Maddie said firmly, "because that's what superheroes do. They help people even when it's hard." And looking at his daughter, at her absolute certainty in the value of kindness, Daniel felt the last of his doubt dissolve. Yes, the situation was complicated. Yes, there would be more criticism and controversy ahead. Yes, he'd benefited from privilege and luck and circumstances that most people would never experience. But he was going to use that privilege to help others. He was going to work harder than anyone expected. He was going to prove over and over again that the second chance he'd been given was worth someone's faith. Because that's what you did when you got lucky. You paid it forward. You helped the next person. You became the angel in someone else's storm. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. 3 weeks later, Daniel stood in front of the bathroom mirror at Community Solutions Partners, straightening his tie for the third time. Through the closed door, he could hear the buzz of activity, caterers setting up in the conference room, staff members arranging chairs, the hum of voices as early arrivals trickled in. Tonight was the official launch event for Lily's Wings, and Daniel felt like he might throw up. "You look fine," Patricia said when he finally emerged. She was wearing a navy dress and her most professional smile, but Daniel could see the stress lines around her eyes. This event mattered, not just for the program, but for the organization's reputation. After weeks of scrutiny following the nonprofit Watchdog article, they needed tonight to go perfectly. "Claire just arrived. She's asking for you." Daniel found Claire in Patricia's office, one hand resting on her very pregnant belly, the other scrolling through her phone. She looked up when he entered and smiled. "There you are. Ready for this?" "Not even a little bit." Daniel closed the door behind him. "Claire, what if nobody applies? What if the whole initiative falls flat? Then we'll learn from it and try something different. But Daniel, look at this." She turned her phone toward him, showing a news article. The headline read, "Whitmore Holdings announces character-based hiring initiative." The story had been picked up by national outlets, shared thousands of times on social media, and generated hundreds of comments, most of them positive. People are excited about this. They want to believe that kindness matters, that character counts for something. You've given them hope. "We've given them hope," Daniel corrected. "This was your idea. Inspired by your actions. There's a difference." Claire stood, wincing slightly as she adjusted her position. "This baby is determined to make everything uncomfortable. 3 more weeks can't come fast enough." Are you sure you should be here? You should be resting." "I'm not missing this, Daniel. This program is too important." She moved toward the door, then paused. "By the way, there's someone here I think you should meet. Someone who wanted to thank you personally." "Who?" Claire's smile turned mysterious. "Come see." The conference room had been transformed. White tablecloths covered tables laden with appetizers and drinks. A banner reading "Lily's Wings," where character creates opportunity, hung on the wall, featuring Maddie's crayon drawing blown up to poster size. The stick figure with angel wings smiled down at the gathering crowd, and Daniel felt his throat tighten every time he looked at it. Patricia was talking to a group of board members. Marcus and Jennifer were giving a tour to some journalists, and standing near the refreshment table, looking uncomfortable in a borrowed suit, was Miguel Rodriguez, one of Daniel's Bridges Forward participants. "Miguel!" Daniel crossed the room quickly. "What are you doing here? I thought you had training tonight." Miguel's face broke into a wide grin. "Mr. Hayes, Ms. Whitmore invited me. Said she wanted to hear about the program from someone actually in it." "She did?" Man, I was nervous as hell. I ain't never been to anything this fancy, but she was cool about it, asked me questions about what I'm learning, what's helping, what could be better. I told her the truth, that you changed my life. Daniel felt his face grow warm. You're changing your own life, Miguel. I'm just helping remove some obstacles. Nah, man, it's more than that. Before Bridges Ford, I'd been out of work for 8 months. 8 months of sending out resumes and getting nothing back, of watching my savings disappear, of feeling like I'd never catch a break. Then you signed me up for IT training, helped me get a laptop, connected me with that tech company doing interviews. I start my new job next Monday, $48,000 a year with benefits. Do you know what that means for my family? I'm so proud of you, Miguel. I'm proud of me too. First time in a long time I can say that. Miguel looked around the room at the well-dressed people with their wine glasses and business cards. This is wild, though. All these important people here because you helped some lady change a tire. Because kindness matters, Daniel said. That's what tonight is about. The event officially started at 7. Patricia gave opening remarks, thanking everyone for coming and introducing the mission of Lily's Wings. Then Claire took the microphone, her pregnancy evident as she stood at the podium, and told the story of that morning in the rain. I was stranded, pregnant, and terrified, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. Car after car drove past me. Everyone had somewhere to be, something more important than helping a stranger. Except for one person. Daniel Hayes stopped. He was already running late for a career-defining presentation. He knew he'd face consequences. But he stopped anyway because that's who he is. Someone who sees another human being in need and chooses to help. Claire paused, looking directly at Daniel. That choice cost him his job. And when I learned what happened, I couldn't accept it. I couldn't accept living in a world where kindness is punished, where doing the right thing destroys your future. So I used my privilege and my resources to give Daniel a second chance. And now, with Lily's Wings, we want to give that second chance to hundreds of people just like him. People with character, integrity, and compassion who've been overlooked by traditional hiring systems. The applause was thunderous. Daniel felt dozens of eyes on him as Claire gestured for him to join her at the podium. His legs felt unsteady as he walked to the front of the room. Thank you, Claire, he managed when the applause died down. I'm not great at speeches, so I'll keep this brief. 3 months ago, I was unemployed, terrified, and convinced that I'd made a catastrophic mistake. I'd chosen kindness over career advancement, and it seemed like the universe was telling me that was the wrong choice. But then something extraordinary happened. The person I helped decided to help me back, not because she had to, but because she believed that character matters, that how we treat each other defines who we are. Daniel took a breath, looking around the room at all the faces watching him. Lily's Wings isn't about me, though. It's about all the people out there who make the right choices and get punished for it. The single mother who leaves work to help a stranded motorist and gets fired for being late. The teenager who returns a lost wallet and never gets thanked. The employee who speaks up about wrongdoing and loses their job for it. These are the people we want to find and support, not because they're perfect, but because they're good. And goodness should be rewarded not just in fairy tales, but in real life. More applause. Daniel stepped back, relieved it was over, but Claire gestured for him to stay. There's one more thing, she said. Daniel doesn't know this yet, but we've already received over 300 applications for Lily's Wings. 300 people from across the country who heard about this program and thought, maybe there's a chance for me. Daniel, you're going to be very busy. The number hit him like a physical blow. 300 people, 300 stories, 300 chances to make a difference or let someone down. The weight of it settled on his shoulders, heavy but not crushing. This was what he'd signed up for. This was why it mattered. After the formal presentations ended, the event shifted to mingling and networking. Daniel found himself surrounded by journalists wanting interviews, board members asking about implementation details, and participants from Bridges Forward who'd been invited to share their experiences. He answered questions until his throat was raw, smiled until his face hurt, and shook more hands than he could count. Around 9 o'clock, as the crowd began to thin, a woman approached him hesitantly. She was in her 40s, wearing a department store dress that had seen better days, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Rachel Simmons. I'm one of the people who applied to Lily's Wings. Daniel's attention sharpened immediately. Rachel, it's not a bother at all. Tell me about yourself. I've been a nurse for 15 years. I love my job. I love helping people, being there during their worst moments and their best ones. But 6 months ago, I reported a doctor for misconduct. He was making inappropriate comments to female patients, touching them in ways that weren't medical. I reported it through proper channels, and you know what happened? Nothing. The hospital did an investigation that went nowhere. But suddenly my shifts started getting cut. My evaluations turned negative, and last month I was let go for performance issues. Daniel felt anger rising in his chest. That's retaliation. That's illegal. I know, but I can't afford a lawyer, and even if I could, I'd never work in healthcare again. Whistleblowers don't get hired. So now I'm working retail, making a third of what I used to make, struggling to pay my mortgage. Rachel's voice wavered. When I read about Lily's Wings, about rewarding people who do the right thing even when it costs them, I thought, maybe this is my chance. Maybe someone will finally see that I'm not a troublemaker. I'm just someone who couldn't stay silent. Rachel, I see you. And what happened to you is wrong. Daniel pulled out his phone. I'm making a note of your name right now. I can't make promises about the selection process. There are a lot of applicants, but I want to make sure your story gets heard. Tears spilled down Rachel's cheeks. Thank you. You don't know what that means. Just knowing someone believes me, that's something. Daniel watched her walk away, and the full magnitude of what they were trying to do hit him. 300 applications meant 300 stories like Rachel's, 300 people who'd done the right thing and paid the price, and they could only help a fraction of them. Heavy thoughts? Claire had appeared beside him, one hand pressed to her lower back. Just realizing how much need is out there, how many people are struggling because they chose integrity over self-interest. We can't help everyone, Daniel, but we can help some, and those some will help others. That's how change happens. Not all at once, but person by person, choice by choice. I met someone tonight, Rachel Simmons. She's a nurse who lost her job for reporting misconduct. Her story is heartbreaking. Then make sure we hear it during the selection process. That's your role in this, to be the voice for people like Rachel, people like you were 3 months ago. Don't let us get so caught up in processes and procedures that we forget about the actual humans we're trying to help. They talked for a few more minutes before Claire winced sharply, her hand moving to her belly. Are you okay? Daniel asked immediately. Just Braxton Hicks contractions. I've been having them all week. The doctor said it's normal. But she winced again, and this time Daniel saw pain flash across her face. Claire, I think we should get you to a doctor. I'm fine. The baby's not due for 3 weeks. Babies don't always follow schedules. Patricia, Daniel called across the room. We need to get Claire to the hospital. What followed was controlled chaos. Patricia grabbed her keys while Daniel guided Claire toward the door. Several board members insisted on coming along. Marcus offered to follow in his car. Within 5 minutes, they had a convoy heading to St. Mary's Hospital, with Claire in Patricia's passenger seat, insisting she was overreacting. This is ridiculous, Claire said as another contraction hit. It's probably false labor. We're going to get there and they're going to send me home and I'm going to feel stupid. Better to feel stupid than to have a baby in a car, Patricia said firmly, running a red light. But when they arrived at the hospital and the nurses examined Claire, their expressions turned serious. Mrs. Whitmore, you're in active labor, 4 centimeters dilated and progressing quickly. We need to get you admitted right now. But I'm 3 weeks early, Claire protested, even as they helped her into a wheelchair. The nursery isn't finished. I haven't packed my hospital bag. I had a whole plan. Babies have their own plans, the nurse said kindly. Let's get you comfortable. Daniel found himself in the waiting room with Patricia, Marcus, 2 board members, and half a dozen Whitmore Holdings executives who'd been at the launch event. It was surreal. Hours ago, they'd been celebrating a new program, and now they were waiting for a baby to arrive. Should we call someone? Patricia asked. Family? The baby's father? There is no father in the picture, one of the executives said quietly. Claire chose to do this on her own. Her parents are traveling. We've already contacted them, but they're on a cruise in Alaska. Won't be able to get here until tomorrow at the earliest. Daniel thought about Claire facing this alone, about how terrifying it must be to bring a child into the world without a partner or parent beside you. He thought about his own experience with Maddie's birth, how he'd held Sarah's hand through every contraction, how they'd faced that fear together. "I'm going to check on her," he said, standing. "Sir, you can't—" The nurse at the desk started, but Daniel was already walking toward the labor and delivery ward. He found Claire's room easily. The sound of her labored breathing led him right to it. She was alone except for a nurse checking monitors, her face pale and drawn, her hand gripping the bed rail. "Daniel?" She looked surprised to see him. "You should go home. This could take hours." "I'm not leaving you alone." "You have Maddie." "Maddie is with Mrs. Patterson, who knows I might be late. Claire, you stopped in the rain for me when you were pregnant and afraid. Let me be here for you now." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "I'm terrified." "I know. But you're also strong enough to do this. You're strong enough to do anything." Daniel moved to the side of her bed, taking her hand. "You're not alone, Claire. You have a whole waiting room full of people who care about you." "But none of them are, She stopped, but Daniel understood. "None of them are family. None of them are your partner. None of them are the person who should be here." "Yeah. Then I'll be that person tonight, if you'll let me." Claire squeezed his hand as another contraction hit. "Thank you," she gasped when it passed. "God, thank you." The hours that followed were a blur of contractions and ice chips, of nurses checking progress and doctors offering encouragement, of Claire gripping Daniel's hand hard enough to leave bruises. He wiped her forehead with a cool cloth, reminded her to breathe through the pain, and told her stories about Maddie's birth to distract her from the intensity of what her body was doing. "Sarah was in labor for 18 hours, he said during one of the calmer moments. 18 hours of cursing my name and swearing she'd never let me touch her again. But the moment they put Maddie in her arms, all that pain just dissolved. She looked at our daughter and said, 'We should do this again.' I said, 'Ask me in 18 hours. Claire laughed weakly. "Did you? Do it again?" "We tried. After Maddie turned 2, Sarah got pregnant again. We were so excited. Maddie was going to be a big sister, but Sarah miscarried at 12 weeks. And then—" Daniel's voice caught. "Then the cancer showed up. So Maddie is our only one, our perfect one. I'm sorry." "Me too, but I'm grateful for what we had, for what I still have." Daniel checked the monitor as another contraction started. "Claire, this is a big one. Breathe through it. You've got this." At 2:47 a.m., after nearly 6 hours of labor, the doctor announced it was time to push. Daniel stepped back to give the medical team room, but Claire grabbed his hand. "Don't leave. Please. I'm right here." What happened next was both exactly like and completely different from Maddie's birth. The same intensity, the same primal power of a woman bringing life into the world, but this time Daniel was the support person rather than the terrified father, the steady hand rather than the emotional wreck. He counted through contractions, offered encouragement, and marveled at Claire's strength. At 3:12 a.m. on a cold December morning, Gabriel James Whitmore entered the world with a lusty cry that announced his displeasure at the whole situation. The nurses cleaned him quickly and placed him in Claire's arms, and Daniel watched her face transform, exhaustion giving way to wonder, pain dissolving into love. "Hi, baby," Claire whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hi, Gabriel. I'm your mom. I've been waiting so long to meet you." The baby quieted at her voice, his tiny eyes trying to focus on her face. Daniel felt his own tears falling as he witnessed this moment, this sacred, beautiful moment of a mother meeting her child for the first time. "He's perfect," Daniel said quietly. "He really is." Claire looked up at him, her face radiant despite the exhaustion. "Thank you for being here, for staying. There's nowhere else I would have been." A nurse took Gabriel for his measurements and tests, and Claire reached for Daniel's hand again. "I want you to be his godfather, not in a religious sense. I'm not particularly religious, but in the sense of someone who's committed to being in his life, who'll help guide him, who'll teach him about kindness and integrity, and all the things that matter." Daniel felt the weight of the request settle on his shoulders. Claire, that's a huge responsibility. I know, but I can't think of anyone better. You're the person I want Gabriel to grow up knowing, the example I want him to follow. Then I'd be honored. They brought Gabriel back, and Claire nursed him for the first time while Daniel sat in the visitor chair, bearing witness to the beginning of their story together. Around 4 a.m., he finally stepped out to the waiting room to share the news. The crowd had thinned, some of the board members had gone home, though a few executives remained. Patricia jumped up when Daniel emerged. Well? A boy, Gabriel James Whitmore, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Both mom and baby are healthy and perfect. The relief in the room was palpable. People hugged each other, pulled out their phones to share the news, and asked when they could visit. Daniel fielded questions for a few minutes before excusing himself to call Mrs. Patterson. Helen, it's Daniel. I'm so sorry about the time. Nonsense. I've been awake waiting for news. How is she? She's amazing. The baby's amazing. Everything's amazing. Daniel realized he was rambling, punchy from exhaustion and emotion. I'll be home in a few hours. Maddie doesn't have school today, right? Teacher Professional Development Day. She'll sleep late. Take your time, Daniel. You did a good thing tonight. Daniel returned to Claire's room to find her settled in a recovery room with Gabriel sleeping in a bassinet beside her bed. She looked exhausted but happy, her hair a mess and her hospital gown unflattering, but Daniel didn't think he'd ever seen her look more beautiful. Your fan club is asking when they can visit, he said. Tell them noon. I need a few hours to just be with him, to figure out how this works. That's smart. Daniel moved to look at Gabriel, at his tiny fists and scrunched up face. He's really something, Claire. He is. And he's going to grow up in a world where kindness matters, where character counts for something, where people help each other because of what we're building together. No pressure on the kid, Claire laughed softly. None at all. He just has to change the world, one person at a time. Daniel stayed until the sun came up, talking quietly with Claire about parenting and fear and hope, about Lily's wings and bridges forward, and all the work still ahead of them. When he finally left the hospital, the December morning was crisp and bright, and Daniel felt like he was walking through a new world, one where impossible things happened, where kindness was rewarded, where stories had happy endings. He picked up Maddie from Mrs. Patterson's house, and she immediately bombarded him with questions about where he'd been all night. Daniel told her about the baby, about being in the delivery room, about becoming a godfather. Does that mean Gabriel is like my brother? Maddie asked, processing this new information. Not exactly. More like a cousin, maybe. Someone will be in each other's lives who will care about and help grow up. Can we visit him? Later this week, when Claire's home and settled. But, Maddie, there's something else I want to talk to you about. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed her photos he'd taken at the launch event, her drawing blown up on the banner, the crowd gathered beneath it, the Lily's Wings logo featuring her stick figure with angel wings. Your drawing is helping people now, lots and lots of people. Maddie stared at the photos, her eyes wide. That's my drawing. It is. And it inspired a whole program about helping people who do the right thing. You did that, sweetheart. Your belief in kindness, in helping others, that's making a real difference now. Does that make me a superhero too? Daniel pulled his daughter into a hug, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the solid weight of her in his arms. Yeah, baby, it absolutely does. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Daniel divided his time between launching the Second Bridges Forward cohort, reviewing Lily's Wings applications, and helping Claire adjust to new motherhood. He visited her townhouse regularly, bringing groceries and helping with laundry and holding Gabriel so Claire could shower. Maddie came along sometimes, enchanted by the tiny baby and surprisingly gentle with him. He's so small, Daddy, she whispered one afternoon, watching Gabriel sleep. Was I ever that small? Even smaller. You were only 6 pounds when you were born. That's crazy. How did I not break? Daniel laughed at her serious expression. Babies are tougher than they look, like you. The Lily's Wings selection process was harder than Daniel anticipated. 300 applications meant 300 difficult stories, 300 people deserving help. With Claire on maternity leave, Daniel led the selection committee along with Patricia, 2 Whitmore Holdings executives, and a representative from another nonprofit partner. They spent hours reviewing applications, conducting phone interviews, and debating who needed help most urgently. Rachel Simmons, the nurse who'd been fired for whistleblowing, made it to the final round. So did a teacher who'd been let go for standing up to a discriminatory principal, a warehouse worker who'd been terminated for reporting safety violations, a retail employee fired for refusing to lie to customers. Each story was a testament to the cost of integrity, to the price people paid for doing right in a world that often rewarded wrong. They could only select 20 people for the first cohort, 20 out of 300. The other 280 would receive letters thanking them for applying and encouraging them to reapply in the next cycle. Daniel agonized over every decision, knowing that each rejection meant someone would continue struggling, would continue paying the price for their good character. "We can't save everyone, Patricia reminded him after a particularly difficult selection meeting. "But the 20 we choose will have transformed lives. And maybe they'll transform lives in turn. That's how change spreads." In early January, Daniel attended his first official day as godfather to Gabriel. Claire had planned a small gathering at her townhouse, just Daniel, Maddie, Patricia, and a few close friends from Whitmore Holdings. There was no ceremony, no religious ritual. Just Claire standing in her living room holding Gabriel and saying, "Daniel Hayes, I'm entrusting you with a sacred responsibility. If anything ever happens to me, you become this little boy's guardian. You become his family. Do you accept?" Daniel felt the weight of every person in that room watching him, but mostly he felt the weight of Claire's trust, of this tiny life that depended on the adults around him to get it right. "I accept. I promise to always be there for Gabriel, to help him grow into a good man, to teach him that kindness and character matter more than success or money or status. I promise to honor your trust." Maddie tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, does that mean if something happens to Ms. Claire, Gabriel comes to live with us?" "That's exactly what it means, sweetheart." "Cool. I always wanted a brother." Everyone laughed, the tension breaking, and they moved on to cake and presents and cooing over how much Gabriel had already grown. But later, as Daniel drove home with Maddie asleep in the back seat, he thought about the promise he'd made, about how his life had expanded in the past 3 months to include people he'd never expected: Claire, Gabriel, the participants in his programs, the applicants counting on Lily's wings to give them a chance. He thought about that morning in the rain, about the split-second decision that had changed everything. If he'd driven past Claire that day, where would he be now? Probably still at Freshmart, probably still miserable, probably still just surviving instead of actually living. But he'd stopped, and that choice had led to this, to meaningful work, an expanded family, and a life that actually mattered. By February, the first Lily's Wings cohort was selected and the placement process began. Daniel worked with partnering organizations to match participants with opportunities aligned with their skills and situations. Rachel Simmons, the nurse, was connected with a hospital in a neighboring state that valued whistleblowers and had robust protections against retaliation. The teacher was placed in a district known for progressive policies and strong union support. The warehouse worker received training in OSHA compliance and was hired by a company that prioritized worker safety. Each placement felt like a small victory, but Daniel knew the real work was just beginning. Changing jobs was only the first step. The real transformation came in the months that followed. Improving yourself, rebuilding confidence, learning to trust that your next employer wouldn't punish you for having principles. Daniel created a mentorship component for Lily's Wings, pairing each participant with someone who'd successfully navigated similar challenges. He organized monthly check-ins and quarterly gatherings where participants could support each other and share their experiences. He documented everything meticulously, knowing that the program's continued funding would depend on demonstrable outcomes. By March, the results were already showing promise. 18 of the 20 participants were thriving in their new positions. 2 were struggling. One had discovered that their new workplace had its own problems. The other was dealing with family issues that made employment difficult. But Daniel worked with them to find solutions and support. This wasn't about perfection. It was about giving people a fighting chance. The nonprofit watchdog published a follow-up article in April, checking in on the programs and initiatives that had sparked controversy months earlier. Richard Marsh, the journalist who'd initially questioned Daniel's hiring, now praised Lily's Wings as an innovative approach to addressing character-based discrimination in the workplace. He interviewed 3 participants, all of whom credited the program with transforming their lives. But he also didn't shy away from tough questions. The fundamental challenge remains, Marsh wrote. Lily's Wings, for all its good intentions, is still dependent on the largesse of wealthy individuals and corporations. It provides opportunities but doesn't address the systemic issues that make such opportunities necessary. Why do we live in a society where being kind and ethical can cost you your livelihood? Until we answer that question, programs like Lily's Wings will remain band-aids on a wound that requires surgery. Daniel found himself agreeing with the critique even as he bristled at it. Yes, they were treating symptoms rather than diseases. Yes, systemic change would require policy reforms and cultural shifts that went far beyond what one program could accomplish. But in the meantime, people needed help, families needed stability. And if Lily's Wings could provide that while also raising awareness about these broader issues, wasn't that better than doing nothing? He called Marsh to discuss the article. I wanted you to know that I appreciate your honesty. You're right that we're not solving the root problems, but we're helping real people right now, and that matters. It does matter, Marsh agreed, and I'm genuinely impressed with what you've built, Daniel. But don't let success make you complacent. Keep pushing for bigger changes. Keep using your platform to highlight these systemic issues. I will, I promise. Spring brought new challenges and new opportunities. The second Bridges Forward cohort graduated with an 85% job placement rate. Local businesses were starting to specifically request referrals from the program, recognizing that participants came with strong work ethic and commitment to excellence. Daniel began getting calls from other cities asking about replicating the model. Claire returned from maternity leave in April, and they resumed their monthly check-in calls. But now the calls often included Gabriel's babbling in the background, Claire's occasional need to pause for nursing breaks, and conversations about the intersection of parenting and professional life. I understand your life so much better now, Claire said during one call, bouncing Gabriel on her knee while reviewing Daniel's monthly report. The constant juggling, the guilt about being away from your kid, the exhaustion of trying to do everything well. How did you manage alone for 3 years? Barely, and with a lot of help from Helen Patterson. Claire, if you ever need anything, childcare backup, someone to hold Gabriel so you can sleep, whatever, just call me. That's what godfathers are for. I'm taking you up on that. Next week I have a board meeting that conflicts with Gabriel's doctor appointment. Can you take him? And so Daniel found himself sitting in a pediatrician's waiting room on a Tuesday morning, holding a 4-month-old baby while Maddie was at school and his work laptop sat unopened in his bag. Gabriel was teething and fussy, and Daniel walked him around the waiting room, bouncing gently and murmuring the same nonsense words he'd once used with Maddie. You're good with him, a woman in the waiting room observed. Is he your son? Godson. But yes, I'm good with him. Daniel smiled down at Gabriel, who'd finally settled against his shoulder. I've had practice. The simple act of helping Claire with childcare felt significant in a way Daniel couldn't quite articulate. This wasn't about programs or initiatives or making a difference at scale. This was just one person helping another with the ordinary challenges of daily life. And maybe that was just as important as any professional achievement. The small acts of service that held communities together, that made life manageable, that reminded people they weren't alone. By summer, Lily's Wings had expanded to include a second cohort of participants. The board of Whitmore Holdings, impressed by the outcomes of the first year, increased funding to support 40 participants. Applications flooded in, over 600 this time, as word spread about the program's success. Daniel hired an assistant to help manage the volume, a recent college graduate named Amy who'd heard about Lily's Wings and applied for the administrative position specifically because she believed in the mission. Together, they developed better systems for application review, participant support, and outcome tracking. We're building something real, Amy said one afternoon, surrounded by files and spreadsheets, something that's going to outlast any of us individually. That's the goal, Daniel agreed. To create a model that other organizations can replicate, that becomes so successful that eventually we work ourselves out of a job because everyone's doing this. You really think that's possible? That character-based hiring could become the norm? Maybe not the norm, but more common. Yes. I think people are hungry for workplaces that value more than just skills and credentials. They want to work for organizations that see them as whole people, that care about integrity and compassion and all the things that make us human. One evening in late June, Daniel received an unexpected phone call from Robert Hendricks. His former boss, the man who'd fired him, the man who'd sent bitter emails accusing Daniel of ruining his career. "Hayes, this is Hendricks. Don't hang up." Daniel almost did hang up, his finger hovering over the red button, but curiosity and maybe something deeper made him listen. "I'm listening. I saw the article about Lily's wings, saw what you've accomplished, and I wanted to say I was wrong about you, about that morning, about everything." Daniel sat down heavily on his couch, not trusting his legs to hold him. "What?" "I've had a lot of time to think since I lost my job. A lot of time to reflect on my management style, my priorities, the kind of leader I was. And the truth is, you were right. I valued the wrong things. I punished people for having humanity. I created a toxic environment because I thought that's what it meant to be tough and professional." Hendrick's voice wavered. "I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I operated that way, why I hurt people. And I realized I owe you an apology. You were a good employee, a good person. You didn't deserve what I did to you." Daniel felt a complicated tangle of emotions: anger for what Hendricks had put him through, vindication that he was finally being proven right, and something uncomfortably close to sympathy for a man who'd clearly been struggling. "Thank you for saying that. It means something. Does it help? Does it make any difference now?" "Honestly, I don't know. I'm in a good place now, better than I was at Freshmart. So, in a weird way, you firing me led to something positive. But it was terrifying at the time, and I'm still angry about how it happened." "You have every right to be angry. I was cruel, unnecessarily cruel." Hendricks paused. "I heard that Claire Whitmore fired me because of you, because of your case. She fired you because of a pattern of behavior that my case exposed. You made that bed, Hendricks. I'm sorry you lost your job, but you earned that outcome." "I know. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I know that now. And I'm working on becoming someone different, someone better. It might be too late to save my career in management, but it's not too late to become a decent human being." They talked for a few more minutes, an awkward conversation between two men who'd hurt each other in different ways. When they hung up, Daniel felt exhausted, but also lighter somehow. Hendrick's apology didn't erase what had happened, didn't magically heal old wounds, but it was closure. It was acknowledgement. It was enough. The summer passed in a blur of work and family time. Daniel took Maddie to the community pool on weekends, where she practiced her swimming, and he tried not to worry every time she jumped off the diving board. They visited Claire and Gabriel regularly, and Maddie took her role as big sister figure very seriously, always wanting to help with feeding or playing or reading board books to a baby who mostly just chewed on them. In August, Community Solutions Partners held its annual gala, a fundraising event that Daniel had been planning for months. The theme was Building Bridges, celebrating the success of Bridges Forward and showcasing participant stories. 5 graduates spoke at the event, sharing how the program had transformed their lives. Miguel Rodriguez, who'd started his IT job back in January, brought his wife and children. "Before Bridges Forward, I was depressed. I felt like I'd failed my family, like I couldn't provide for them, no matter how hard I tried. Now I have a career with growth potential. My kids look at me with pride instead of worry. That's everything." The gala raised over $200,000, surpassing every expectation. Daniel stood at the back of the room, watching donors write checks and business cards being exchanged, and felt a profound sense of gratitude for how far they'd come. Patricia found him there, a glass of wine in each hand. She offered him one. "We did it. We actually did it." "You did it," Daniel corrected. "I just showed up and worked hard." "No, Daniel, you showed up and transformed this organization. Before you, we were good at what we did. But you made us great. You brought passion and innovation and a level of commitment that inspired everyone around you. Don't minimize that." They clinked glasses and drank, watching the crowd celebrate their shared success. By September, a year after that morning in the rain, Daniel had become somewhat of a minor celebrity in nonprofit circles. He was invited to speak at conferences about character-based hiring and second chance employment. Organizations across the country reached out asking for advice on replicating the Lily's Wings model. He was profiled in a national magazine with the headline, "The Man Who Chose Kindness Over Career and Found Both." But despite the recognition and success, what Daniel valued most were the small, ordinary moments. Maddie's gymnastics recital where she nailed her beam routine and beamed with pride. Sunday dinners at Helen Patterson's house where they ate pot roast and laughed at old stories. Quiet evenings holding Gabriel while Claire caught up on sleep. The daily grind of work that actually mattered, helping people, solving problems, building something meaningful. One October evening, almost exactly a year after he'd stopped to help Claire in the rain, Daniel received a text message from a number he didn't recognize. It included a photo of a young woman in nursing scrubs, smiling broadly in what looked like a hospital hallway. The caption read, "First day at my new job. Thank you for believing in me. Rachel Simmons." Daniel showed the photo to Maddie over dinner. "Remember Ms. Rachel, the nurse I told you about who lost her job for doing the right thing? The one who told on the bad doctor. That's her. She just started a new job at a hospital that values people like her because of Lily's Wings." Maddie studied the photo seriously. "She looks happy." "She does. Because someone gave her a second chance to use her talents and do good work. Like Ms. Claire gave you a second chance. Exactly like that." "Daddy, do you think Mommy would be proud of us? Of what we're doing?" The question hit Daniel in the chest, unexpected and profound. He set down his fork and really looked at his daughter. At this wise, compassionate 8-year-old who still believed in superheroes and angel wings and the fundamental goodness of people. "I think Mommy would be incredibly proud of both of us, baby. Proud of how we've taken our grief and our struggles and turned them into something positive. Proud of how we help people. Proud of how we remember that kindness matters, even when it's hard. I miss her." "Me too. Every single day. But I think she's with us, Maddie. In the choices we make, in the values we hold, in the way we treat other people. That's how she lives on." That night, after Maddie was asleep, Daniel sat on his back porch in the October chill and thought about the past year. About the choice in the rain that had seemed like the end of everything but turned out to be the beginning of something better. About Claire and Gabriel, about Patricia and the team at Community Solutions Partners, about all the participants whose lives had been transformed by second chances. He thought about the drawing Maddie had made, about the stick figure with angel wings that now represented a movement, a philosophy, a commitment to valuing character over credentials. He thought about how that simple crayon image had inspired something larger than any of them had imagined. His phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Gabriel took his first steps today. First words were no and more, which pretty much sums up parenthood. "Come see us this weekend? Maddie can teach him to walk properly." Daniel smiled and typed back, "We'll be there. Wouldn't miss it." As he sat there in the darkness, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years, peace. Not the absence of challenges or struggles, but a deep certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. He'd stopped to help someone in the rain. That moment of kindness had cost him everything he thought he had and given him everything he actually needed. It had cost him a job, but given him a purpose. It had cost him security, but given him meaning. It had cost him comfort, but given him joy. And looking back now, knowing everything that followed, Daniel wouldn't change a single thing. Because sometimes when you stop to help someone else, you find the road that leads you home. Not back to where you were, but forward to where you were always meant to be. The storm that had seemed like destruction had actually been transformation. The rain that had felt like punishment had actually been baptism. And the stranger he'd helped had become family. Not through blood, but through something stronger, shared values, mutual respect, and a commitment to building a world where kindness wasn't just rewarded in fairy tales, but in real, messy, complicated life. Daniel finished his beer and stood, ready to go inside to his warm house and sleeping daughter and all the blessings he'd somehow been given. Tomorrow he'd wake up and go to work helping more people find their own second chances. He'd review Lily's Wings applications and check on Bridges Forward participants and answer emails and attend meetings and do all the ordinary work that added up to something extraordinary. But tonight, he'd just be grateful. Grateful for a flat tire in the rain. Grateful for a woman brave enough to use her privilege to help. Grateful for a daughter who believed in angel wings. Grateful for a job that mattered and a life that meant something. Grateful that he'd made the choice to stop, to help, to care about someone other than himself. Because in the end, that's all any of us can do. Stop in the rain when someone needs us. Trust that goodness matters, and believe that kindness will find its way back around. Sometimes it does. Sometimes, if you're very lucky and very blessed, it absolutely does.